Hey guys, tonight we slip back to a time when your bedroom isn't yours alone. In fact, it's more like a damp cave filled with human noise, bad breath, and the strong scent of boiled cabbage. You've just arrived at your new home, a massive, cold stone castle, and guess what? You're not alone. You're sharing this drafty, echoing beast with nearly 300 other people. That's right, welcome to medieval castle life, population, too many. Outside, the wind slices through your cloak like it's trying to borrow your soul. The dirt road behind you has eaten your boots, and the mud still clings to your ankles. You're tired, you're hungry, and as the gates creak open, the first thing you notice is not the beauty of the stonework or the honor of being allowed inside, it's the smell. Oh dear. A blend of wet straw, old meat, animal musk, and people. So many people. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time, I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand just inside the gatehouse, blinking in the gloom. The stone walls stretch impossibly high above, and a murder of crows circles the top like they're debating which of you looks most edible. A portcullis slams down behind you with a clang that rings in your bones. You flinch. The guard smirks. That won't be the last time someone laughs at your expense today. You're immediately swallowed into the inner bailey, a broad open space between curtain walls. Mud squelches beneath your feet, and you dodge a child with a wooden sword, a limping pig, and a servant dragging a load of kindling. Shouts echo from all sides. The forge glows in the corner like a furnace of angry gods, and somewhere to your right, a dog is barking at a chicken with a vendetta. This place is a circus, except the animals and performers are also the janitors, cooks, soldiers, and stable hands. Everyone's doing something. You? You're trying not to look like you don't belong. You spot a man in a gambeson, thickly quilted armor, and he waves you toward the central keep. That's your destination. Home base. Fortress within the fortress. The big, square stone tower where most of the people sleep, eat, and avoid the weather. It looks cozier from the outside. As you cross the bailey, people pause to stare. Some tilt their heads. One old woman hawks something from her throat that you really hope is just spit. A boy with too many freckles whispers something to his friend. You get the sense they're all categorizing you already. Fresh meat, says a voice behind you. Inside the keep, the air shifts. It's cooler, darker, and somehow louder. The thick walls trap every echo, every cough, every boot scrape. It smells of stone, smoke, and centuries of unwashed humans. And there are so many of them. You're herded toward a corner of the great hall, past rows of rough wooden tables and benches where people eat, talk, argue, and occasionally slap each other. Above, wooden beams creak ominously with the weight of a floor filled with more rooms and more people. Somewhere, a baby wails. Somewhere else, someone laughs too loudly at a joke involving turnips. You don't get it yet. You will. The steward, a man who looks like he hasn't smiled since his baptism, reads your name off a list. You're expected. Barely. He tells you where to go, and off you trudge, up a narrow spiral staircase carved into the wall like a snail's revenge on humanity. It's steep, uneven, and you're almost knocked flat by a passing scullery maid with the shoulders of a prize ox. Finally, you reach your assigned level. Floor 3. Your room is a strip of space between a barrel of salted fish and a row of straw pallets already occupied by snoring, sweaty men. Some of them glance up. Most don't bother. You drop your bag, take one long inhale, immediate regret, and claim the empty spot beside a wall dripping with condensation. A girl nearby nods at you. Don't leave food out, she says. The rats drag it into people's mouths while they sleep. Cool. Now begins the real adjustment, living in this castle. Your ears are never free from sound. Someone is always hammering, someone is always singing terribly, and at least 2 people are always whispering about someone else. You don't know who the names belong to yet, but the gossip is juicy and you file it away. Historians still argue whether all 300 people truly lived inside the castle full-time, or if the population fluctuated depending on season, security, and whether the lord felt like sharing his beer that week. But you're here now, and it feels like everyone else is too. Soldiers, servants, squires, sempstresses, cooks, falconers, jesters, and people whose only job seems to be standing around with a dagger. There's no such thing as privacy. You're lucky if you can fart in peace without 3 people commenting on it. Want to wash? Tough luck. The communal bath happens once a month if you're lucky, and by the time it's your turn, the water looks like beef stew. You settle for wiping your armpits with your tunic and hoping for the best. Someone tells you the lady of the keep uses rose water. Someone else mutters that it's probably just rainwater in a fancy jug. No one dares test the theory. One day, while you're hauling firewood from the courtyard, you pass a man with gold-threaded sleeves. Everyone stops to bow. That's the lord, the owner of this whole operation. He doesn't look at you. That's fine. You're not ready for his gaze yet. Later, you help in the kitchen. A massive hearth roars with flame, and a cook with arms like hams hands you a knife and points at a bucket of eels. You're not sure whether you're supposed to kill them or apologize to them. They stare. You slice. A child scurries past carrying what looks like an entire sheep's head. No one stops her. Still, it's not all chaos. As the days pass, you begin to notice rhythms. Morning bells. Chores. Midday break. Evening feasting. Music after dark. Shouting. Laughing. Weeping. More shouting. You even catch a quiet moment once, in the upper corridor, where a ray of sun pierces through an arrow slit and dances on the stone floor like a ghost of calm. You sit there for 2 whole minutes before a passing guard accuses you of loitering. Your first week passes in a blur of new smells, calloused hands, and a vague sense that your dignity is packed away in someone else's trunk. You learn to step over puddles that aren't just water, to duck before crossing certain beams, and never, ever, take the last crust of bread. That belongs to old Marek, and he bites. Oh, and one more thing. Don't look the falconer's birds in the eye. One of them remembers faces. You don't want to find out why. You wake to a noise you can't immediately place, somewhere between a sneeze, a cough, and someone trying not to die. Then you remember, you're not in your childhood bed, you're not even in a proper room. You're in a cold stone keep, in a communal sleeping space that smells like wet wool and foot fungus, and the noise is just a man 3 feet away snoring with the drama of a drowning walrus. Your back aches from sleeping on straw packed so loosely you might as well have curled up on gravel. The person beside you has stolen half your blanket. Again. You try to pull it back without waking them, but fail spectacularly when they let out a groggy oi, and roll away, taking the rest of the blanket with them. Welcome to day 2. Time to claim your spot, or lose it forever. The castle may feel like a maze, but the social structure is far more complicated. You're not just new. You're unknown. And the unspoken rules here are brutal. The spaces where people sleep aren't assigned, not really. They're taken, defended, and only abandoned after death, or a compelling bribe. You've landed a questionable strip of floor near the kitchen stairs. It's noisy, hot in summer, freezing in winter, and the traffic never stops. But it's yours. For now. Claiming your spot means more than dropping your sack and hoping for the best. It means understanding who sleeps nearby, which corners are too close to chamber pots, and who gets up early for work duty, translation, who will step on your face every morning. There's a guy named Finn who whistles in his sleep. He's harmless but twitchy. To your left is Magda, who has at least 6 cousins also living in the keep and will use all of them to defend her prime bedding real estate. Avoid that argument. You begin decorating, not with posters or potted plants, but with subtle signs that this patch is yours. A blanket folded just so. Your boots positioned against the wall at a familiar angle. A dent in the straw, shaped by your bony hip. Even a borrowed wooden spoon placed like a totem. Claim staked. Don't get too comfortable. You still have to earn it. The first time someone tries to edge into your space, it's a wide-shouldered stable hand who doesn't see your stuff. You're halfway through a polite protest when Magda snaps at him from across the aisle. He's new, but he's not invisible. The man grumbles, moves along, and you glance at her in silent gratitude. She doesn't smile, but she lifts an eyebrow that says, "You owe me." Now the games begin. There's a pecking order, and it's enforced with a mix of gossip, favors, and strategic sharing. The best spots near the hearth? Already occupied by old-timers who know the cook's birthday and have dirt on the steward. Near the windows? Risky. Drafty in winter, blinding in summer, and those with weak bladders favor the shadows near them. Middle of the room? Social danger zone. Too close to everyone. You've lucked into an edge space, which is not ideal, but less contested. You start to memorize faces. The boy with the crooked nose who always ties his shoes in the same triple knot. The quiet girl with braids who hums during chores and somehow smells like thyme even though no one has seen an herb in this castle for weeks. There's old Marek, of course, who sleeps like the dead and wakes with his fists already clenched. And there's the priest's nephew, who talks in his sleep about sins you'd rather not hear aloud. Historians still argue whether medieval castle residents maintained consistent sleeping quarters or if bed spaces were reshuffled regularly due to chores, season, or sudden outbreaks of lice. But what's clear is, people fought, verbally and occasionally physically, to keep what they considered home. You learn to sleep light. No such thing as earplugs here, and the stone walls echo every burp, cough, and creaky footstep. Some nights you're kept awake by arguments, other times, by songs half mumbled in drunken stupor. Once, you're stirred by the soft patter of rain, and the heavier drip of a leak above your head. The ceiling trickles straight into your ear. That's your cue to find a cloth and wedge it into a crack in the wall. Not the most elegant home repair, but it works. The sleep schedule in the castle isn't uniform. Some rise before dawn to stoke fires or prep the ovens. Others work night shifts, watchmen, cooks, and those who tend the infirmary. And then there are the freeloaders, people who always seem to be between duties. They're the ones who lounge too long, borrow things without returning them, and snore like a dragon choking on a sheep. Avoid them. One particularly memorable night, a dog sneaks in and curls up beside you. You don't question it. It's warm. It smells better than half the humans here. And when a rat scuttles nearby, the dog growls low and deadly. Your new friend is now your blanket, foot warmer, and bodyguard. That morning, you wake with the dog still pressed against your back, and Magda throws you a piece of stale bread as if to say, "Now you're one of us." Tiny victories. You begin forming habits. Always check your boots for spiders before sliding them on. Keep your water flask cap tight. Someone once filled it with fish guts as a joke, and tuck your blanket under your feet so it's harder to steal in the night. Also, trade favors carefully. Someone offers to guard your bedding while you're away. That's code for I will nap in it and probably spill something fermented on it. A quirky tidbit you overhear in the hall one evening, apparently, one of the upper maids insists on sleeping in a chest with the lid cracked open, claims it makes her feel safer, like she's back in the womb. No one's dared open it to check. She snores through the wood, softly. You assume she's alive. In the early days, you sleep poorly, dreamlessly. But slowly, your body adjusts. You learn to find peace in the chaos. You time your sleep around the rhythms of others. You nap in slivers of time between chores. You tune your brain to ignore the sounds you once found maddening. The scent of smoke becomes comforting. The endless chorus of sniffling, coughing, muttering, white noise. And when the great hall grows quiet, and only the low breath of the sleeping remains, you begin to feel something surprising: safety. It's not quiet. It's not private. It's certainly not clean. But in a strange way, sharing a room with 30 strangers becomes less threatening, more human. You start to understand what this place is, not just stone and stink and squabble, but community. That doesn't mean it gets easier. Not yet. One night, a fight breaks out 2 pallets over. You jolt awake to someone shouting about stolen boots. There's a scuffle, someone gets a bloody nose, and the steward is called in. His punishment? Not lashes. He moves the offenders to sleep near the chamber pots for a week. The room winces in collective sympathy. The next morning, someone's blanket has gone missing. You find it stuffed in a crack behind a barrel, wet and reeking. No one admits to anything. People talk a lot about the physical dangers of medieval life, swords, diseases, plummeting off parapets, but they forget the emotional minefield of sharing a life with 300 other humans, each with needs, fears, grudges, and stomachs that rumble at 2 a.m. And yet, somehow, it becomes home. Not just your patch of floor, but the rhythm of the keep. You memorize the creak of certain steps, the smell of morning pottage, the soft clink of armor being buckled 3 rooms away. You're part of it now. Just don't get too relaxed. You've earned your spot. But there are 299 others, and they're all watching. Morning again, but not the gentle kind where sunbeams slip through your window and birds trill polite wake-up songs. No, this one begins with someone emptying a chamber pot into a bucket too close to your bedroll and a rooster crowing directly beneath the stone window slits. You sit up fast enough to make your back crack and knock your elbow on the wall. The dog that's unofficially yours groans and flops its head back down. It's time to rise and shine, or more accurately, rise and shiver, because the air is biting, the floor is damp, and your breath fogs in the dim light. Welcome to Castle Mornings. The day begins early, especially if you're low on the food chain, and let's be honest, you are deeply subterranean right now. Your first task is to warm your fingers enough to tie your boots, which are still slightly wet from yesterday's rainfall and stiff as wooden clogs. You shove your feet in anyway and stand. Your knees protest. So does your spine. Being young doesn't seem to help much when you sleep on hay every night and carry logs all day. You shuffle out into the hall, dodging a sleepy squire who mutters apologies with his eyes still half shut. You pass the old priest hunched over a candle, whispering morning prayers. The great hall is already humming, servants are laying out rough wooden bowls, the hearth is roaring to life, and a cook is shouting about burned porridge. Just another glorious start to a medieval day. You head for the communal wash basin. It's not so much a sink as a barrel of rainwater with a ladle floating in it. You splash your face, grimace, and try not to notice the odd floater swirling around near the bottom. At least it's cold. That'll wake you up. Breakfast is basic. Bread, cheese, and the occasional dab of onion jam, if you're lucky. Sometimes, there's warm pottage, a soupy mash of grains, herbs, and mystery bits. You sit on a bench that rocks slightly under your weight and tear into a hunk of bread so tough it could be used as defense in battle. Next to you, Finn, your snore-prone bedding neighbor, grins. If it crunches, spit it out. That means a weevil survived the cooking. You laugh. You hope he's joking. You're not sure. Historians still argue whether the quality of food varied drastically between noble and servant classes in shared living situations, but the breakfast here speaks for itself. It's fuel, not flavor. You eat because there's work to do, and lots of it. The daily duties of castle life fall into a pattern quickly. You've been assigned to rotating chores, mornings in the woodpile, afternoons in the laundry or kitchen, and evenings on cleaning detail, which mostly involves scraping mysterious things off stone steps with a flat stick and pretending not to smell anything. Each job is its own little saga. Carrying wood means trudging back and forth through the bailey, dodging squires practicing swordplay and knights yelling about form. It's fine until the rain hits, then it's a mud bath with splinters. The laundry is wetter. Massive tubs are filled with lukewarm water and lye soap that scalds your hands raw. You scrub, wring, and rinse sheets that weigh more than you. And the smell? Imagine wet dog mixed with medieval socks. That's the top note. One day you're told to help in the latrine maintenance crew. That's not a team anyone wants to be on. The latrines are essentially tall chutes built into the outer walls, and someone has to make sure they aren't clogged. That someone is now you. You learn to breathe through your mouth and pretend it's just mud. Spoiler, it's not. Still, there's a weird sense of rhythm to it all. A sense of camaraderie too. You're suffering, but you're not alone. Everyone has a job, even if some act like theirs is more noble than yours. The falconer, for example, struts around like he owns the place because he gets to handle birds with knives on their toes. The kitchen staff talk fast, move faster, and pretend they don't see the rats, even when the rats wave back. The blacksmith barely speaks, but his hammer sings all day. You grow used to these sounds like background music. One morning, you're called to help in the chapel. It's dusty, dim, and smells faintly of beeswax and old books. You sweep, polish, and refill the oil in the lamps. The priest thanks you with a soft nod. He's the first adult who doesn't bark at you. You mentally bookmark him as safe. During one break, while chewing what might be your fifth hard-boiled egg of the week, you hear a curious story from the old laundress. She tells you the castle is haunted by a knight who died during a tournament, but not from a wound. No, he supposedly choked on a piece of roast boar while laughing at a fart joke. His ghost, she claims, only appears when someone eats too greedily. You laugh. That night, you dream of armored footsteps pacing near your bedroll. You eat slowly the next day. As the days pass, you start to understand how the castle runs. Like a ship at sea, everyone has a role, and everyone's movements affect everyone else. If the baker is late, the soldiers get grumpy. If the guards get grumpy, the steward gets stricter. If the steward is stricter, your chores get worse. It's a delicate, passive-aggressive food chain. One small win, you're trusted to light the wall sconces. You get a flint, a candle stub, and explicit instructions not to burn down the keep. You succeed. Magda even pats your shoulder. You feel irrationally proud. You also begin to notice the weird little rituals people keep. The head cook always taps the oven door 3 times before placing bread inside. The stable boys never whistle indoors, it's said to summon ill luck. And one man in the lower hall always circles his bucket clockwise before dumping water. When asked why, he says, to keep the spirits dizzy. Fair enough. The days are long, and your body aches in new places every morning. But somehow, that pain becomes part of the rhythm. You don't even notice the bruises anymore. You laugh at things that would have horrified you a week ago. Someone sneezes into a stew pot? You shrug. Extra flavor. Evenings are a brief moment of peace. You share bread, stories, and sometimes music. A young girl with a harp plays near the hearth. A soldier sings about a river maiden and a goat, poorly, but with heart. You wrap your blanket around your shoulders, lean back against the cool wall, and for the first time, truly feel like you belong here. And then someone spills mead into your shoes. Of course. You've made it to your 10th full day inside the castle, and the honeymoon phase is, well, let's say it expired somewhere around the 3rd round of latrine duty. At this point, you know which floorboards creak loudest, which buckets leak, and which dogs are most likely to steal your lunch if you blink too long. And most importantly, you're beginning to understand that a castle isn't just a building, it's a living organism. And you, my friend, are now part of its bloodstream. After breakfast, a barely passable barley mash you sweeten with stolen honey, you're pulled into your newest assignment, corridor runner. It sounds glamorous. It is not. Your job is to carry messages, tools, buckets of water, and sometimes suspiciously lumpy cloth bundles from one part of the keep to another as quickly and invisibly as possible. Basically, you're a castle neuron, messages in, messages out. The twist? You have to do it without tripping over your own feet or a passing goat. Yes, goats. They come in and out of the castle like they pay rent. One even has a bell that clinks in a pattern so familiar it's basically background music at this point. Navigating the castle corridors is a whole separate education. You thought you understood the layout. You did not. the winding passages double back on themselves. Staircases end in ceilings. Doors lead nowhere, or worse, to a room filled with sleeping guards who do not appreciate being woken by someone looking for the well. You learn the secrets. The narrow gap between the kitchen and laundry that bypasses two whole corridors. The hidden pivot panel in the chapel wall that leads to the servants' stairwell. The stone groove where a certain bucket always leaks, step around it unless you want wet socks all day. You become intimately acquainted with the smells of the castle, too. Damp stone. Boiled cabbage. Old leather. Some corridors reek of smoke. Others of mildew. And one, just one, smells suspiciously like lavender and almonds. You assume that's where the lady of the keep takes her baths and file it away as strictly out of bounds. As you weave through the castle day after day, you start to notice more than just smells. You notice the layers. The architecture tells a story, one stone at a time. One hallway is tall, arched, echoing with stained glass windows. Another is barely taller than your head, with soot-smudged walls and torch burns marking the ceiling. One was clearly made for nobility. The other? For servants and shadows. Historians still argue whether medieval castles were designed with efficiency in mind, or if they simply grew like mushrooms, chaotic, accidental, and often nonsensical. Judging by the dead-end stairwell that just stops mid-air, no railing, thanks very much, you're leaning toward the mushroom theory. You overhear a funny tale one day while running a parcel of onions to the scullery. Apparently, one of the lords once got lost in his own castle for 3 hours because he insisted on taking a shortcut to the solar. His valet found him in the armory, eating a pear and insisting he was gathering intelligence. No one believed him. But everyone politely pretends they do. The traffic in the corridors is constant. Pages scampering with scrolls. Maids dragging baskets of linen. Guards pacing, always pacing, even when no one's watching. You realize very quickly that pausing too long in any main corridor means getting side-eyed or given a job. Keep moving, or get handed a mop. There's a silent etiquette to hallway behavior. Eye contact? Optional. Touching? Never, unless someone's about to fall. Apologies? Mumbled at best. You learn to walk like a ghost, quick, light, and unmemorable. You find a favorite route, southwest stairs, past the inner well, then through the tapestry hall. The tapestries are absurd. One features a lion juggling knives while monks cheer. Another shows a knight fighting what looks like a giant chicken. You're fairly certain someone took creative liberties, but hey, it keeps things interesting. Then there's the corridor. You only ever hear it referred to like that. The capital letters are audible in people's voices. It's the narrowest, darkest, coldest passage in the keep, supposedly cursed. No windows. No warmth. One torch bracket, usually empty. No one uses it unless absolutely necessary. But it's a shortcut. And one day, burdened with a pot of stew and a deadline from the head cook, who is scarier than most minor demons, you take it. Instant regret. The air is colder by at least 10 degrees. The silence is loud. You walk fast. Your footsteps echo like drum beats. Halfway through, your candle flickers. Something behind you creaks. You tell yourself it's the draft. You do not run. But let's be honest, you speed walk like your life depends on it. When you burst out the other side, panting, stew sloshed onto your shoes, you vow never to go back. But 2 days later, you do. Because deadlines don't care about ghosts. You're not the only one using the corridors for more than walking. People sneak kisses in shadowy corners. Guards nap in alcoves. Kids play games with wooden dice behind barrels. One elderly woman, who everyone calls Auntie Ro, sets up her spindle in a quiet passage near the solar and sings lullabies while she spins. She's 90 if she's a day, and everyone says she used to be the lady of the keep's wet nurse. Now she's part of the furniture, never in the way, always watching. One afternoon, as you're heading to deliver a message to the steward, she stops you. Hold still, she says, and plucks something off your collar. A beetle. Bad luck, that one. She flicks it away and nods. Now go. He's in a foul mood today. She's right. The steward is yelling about flour rations before you even step into the room. By week's end, you know the castle corridors like your own veins. You could navigate them blindfolded, and, in fact, are dared to do so by Finn one rainy afternoon. You accept. You make it halfway to the army before knocking over a broom and alerting half the garrison. Whoops! But here's the strange thing, the more you walk these halls, the more they feel familiar. Not just in a memorized sense, but in the way that neighborhoods do. You know which walls leak in a storm. Which steps always make that crack sound. Which corners smell like roast duck at noon and stale ale at night. A quirky tidbit you learn, one of the corridor pillars, near the North Tower, is hollow. If you knock on it twice, the sound echoes differently. Some say it was meant to hide treasure. Others say it's where a noble once hid during a siege, so well, in fact, that he starved before anyone remembered to look for him. Your job as a runner means you overhear conversations you shouldn't. You know that the blacksmith is quietly courting the baker's daughter. That the cook keeps a secret stash of apples in the grain sacks. That the steward can't read, but pretends he can by memorizing scroll symbols. Secrets buzz through the walls like bees in a hive. And now? You're one of them. You're not invisible anymore. You're known. People nod when you pass. They ask you to drop this off with the captain, or fetch more wax for the candlesticks. Small jobs, sure, but trusted ones. One night, as you return a borrowed broom, yes, really, you pause in the chapel corridor. It's quiet. Candlelight dances along the stone. Your footsteps echo softly. And for a moment, just a moment, you realize you've memorized the heartbeat of this place. You move through it like you belong. Because now, you do. You've settled into the rhythm of castle life now, waking, working, weaving through corridors like a spider in its web. But what you haven't yet figured out is how to breathe when the whole castle decides to exhale at once. And nothing, absolutely nothing, stirs the pot like the arrival of guests. It begins with a horn blast just before sunrise. Not the usual wake-up din from the rooster or the kitchen clatter. This is a deep, echoing room from the outer wall, followed by bells. Within moments, the entire castle is in motion, like someone kicked an anthill wearing boots made of pure anxiety. Guests, someone yells from the parapets. You groan and roll over. But it's too late. The frenzy has begun. Guests at a castle mean one thing, chaos, with a side of extra soap. Everything must be cleaned, fixed, fluffed, restuffed, and in some cases, hastily repaired using sawdust and prayer. The lord and lady of the keep don't ask if you're ready, they assume you're already polishing something. You're handed a rag and sent to shine the great hall's iron sconces. Next to you, 3 others are scrubbing the floors with vinegar water and woolen pads strapped to their hands. A girl is on a ladder, beating dust out of a banner like it insulted her. Somewhere, someone is boiling herbs to make the place smell like thyme instead of sweaty leather and horses. But it's not just about smells and surfaces, it's about appearances. That old bench with the wobbly leg? Reinforced. The tapestry with the hole? Turned around to hide the damage. Even the livestock are given a once-over. A stable boy combs a pig. You don't ask. Guests arriving means the castle goes from a population of 300 to something like 350 or even 400, all packed into one towering pile of stone. There's no expansion, just redistribution. The guest chambers, kept mostly unused, are aired out and dressed in linen sheets that were saved for exactly this occasion. Feather pillows are fluffed with a dedication usually reserved for religious rites. And you? You've been reassigned to bedroll detail. Because when the nobles visit, they come with entourages. You haul heavy bedding from the storage lofts, your arms dusted in feathers and your throat scratchy from centuries of lint. Some rolls are fine. Others smell like the distant memory of mice. By midday, the guest wagons roll in. You watch from the upper gallery. Nobles in rich colors, pages in matching livery, hunting dogs straining at leashes, and trunks, so many trunks, clatter into the outer yard. It's like watching a parade of silken attitude. You recognize none of them, but you can tell who's important by the way the guards shift their stances and the steward actually bows low enough to make his knees creak. One noblewoman has a hat the size of a serving platter and a gown so wide she can't get through the door without turning sideways. You catch her muttering curses as she wedges herself in. Dignity, lost. The lord of the keep greets them with stiff formality. His lady smiles like she practiced it in a mirror. Meanwhile, the castle's real engine, its workers, rush to accommodate every whim. You're quickly swept up into the logistics storm. Guests need warm water for washing, extra candles, footstools, stools for their stools, yes, really, and more bread than any reasonable human should eat in one sitting. You run errands until your legs wobble. And at night? The feasting begins. You're allowed to peek in from the far end of the Great Hall. That is, until someone tells you to stop leaning on the tapestries because your breath might damage the embroidery. It won't. The feast is a spectacle. The long tables groan under roasted meats, venison, goose, pork stuffed with dried fruit. There are trenchers of thick stews, platters of sweetmeats, jugs of spiced wine. The guests laugh too loudly, chew with gusto, and throw bones into the rushes like that's completely normal. It is. Musicians play lutes and pipes. A juggler drops only 2 knives all night, a record. One night loudly retells a battle story you suspect is wildly exaggerated, since he mentions fighting for boars at once. The lady with the too wide dress ends up stuck in her chair and has to be discreetly unwedged by her maids. You help with cleanup afterward. It's less romantic. You scrape dried gravy off trenchers, sweep bone shards, and mop up what might have been wine but smells suspiciously like feet. At one point, you carry out a goose carcass and accidentally lock eyes with a rat. The rat blinks. You blink. You both walk away. The castle changes when guests arrive. It swells, tightens, holds its breath. Routines are disrupted. Baths are heated at strange hours. The quiet corners fill with hushed gossip. One fringe detail, you hear that some nobles insist on sleeping with their own pillows, not because they're fancy, but because they believe unfamiliar feathers cause nightmares. You wonder if that's true. Then again, after yesterday's stew, you might have had nightmares anyway. Historians still argue whether guest visits were primarily political, familial, or just thinly veiled power plays. Judging by the tension in the kitchens and the faint panic in the steward's eyes, you'd say all three. One morning, you're tasked with helping in the solar, where the noble women sit, embroider, and quietly judge the rest of humanity. You're sent to deliver fresh linens. As you step into the sunlit chamber, the noble ladies pause mid-stitch. One of them looks you up and down and says, "Oh, bless, he's still growing." You want to vanish. Instead, you nod, set down the linens, and back out as gracefully as you can. You trip over the cat on the way out. It hisses. The ladies laugh. You survive. Some guests are kind. They say thank you, look you in the eye, even ask your name. One offers you a piece of honeyed apple from her plate. You take it. For the rest of the week, you quietly consider naming your firstborn after her. Others are less so. One knight throws a goblet when the mead's too warm. A visiting squire refuses to carry his own boots and makes you do it. You consider accidentally dropping them in the latrine. You don't. But it's close. After 5 days, the guests finally leave. They pack their trunks, argue over misplaced gloves, and wave their goodbyes like they're being photographed. Once the last carriage wheels through the gate, the castle exhales in unison. And you collapse into a pile of hay and sleep like the dead for 12 straight hours. When you wake up, the castle feels lighter. Quieter. Yours again. And as you walk through the corridors, once again filled only with familiar faces, you realize something. It's not the luxury or titles or silk that defines this place. It's you. And the 300 other souls like you, carrying the castle on your backs, one corridor at a time. It's late. The torches along the corridor flicker low, casting long shadows on the stone walls. You're heading to your bedroll after another long day, stomach still churning from that questionable cabbage stew. But before you can turn in, you hear it, the faint shuffle of boots, the whisper of mail shifting, the sharp bark of a name being called. The night guard is assembling. You didn't think much about it before. After all, you sleep indoors now. What's there to fear? But now that you're watching them don their gear and check the gate chains, you begin to realize something chilling. This castle, your home, your hive, has no real walls against the dark. Just people. Just guards. And every night, they have to be ready for anything. Welcome to the midnight heartbeat of the castle. The night watch isn't glamorous. No trumpets. No roaring fires. Just a lot of pacing and staring into blackness, ears trained for anything that doesn't belong. The castle may feel sleepy and still once the sun sets, but beneath that hush is a coiled wire of tension. Because bad things happen at night. Your current role? Assistant torch runner. It's as simple and exhausting as it sounds. You check which torches are dying and run fresh oil or fire from brazier to brazier, making sure no corridor goes completely dark. You start to understand the layers of night, the way different parts of the keep fall asleep at different hours. The chapel quiets early. The kitchen lingers, cleaning into the dark. The army glows the longest, lit by guards oiling swords under dim lanterns. The night smells different, too. Less smoke, more damp. More rot from the moat. More horse sweat and wet leather. And occasionally, the acrid stink of a guard's forgotten latrine bucket. You learn quickly which stairwells to avoid. In the bailey, the outer gate guards huddle under cloaks. They stamp their feet against the chill and murmur half-hearted jokes to stay awake. You sit with them sometimes, trading crusts of bread and stories of weird things they've seen in the dark. Last week, one says, picking at a loose thread in his glove, I saw a figure moving along the outer wall. I shouted, drew my blade, turned out to be a fat owl. They all laugh. You try to. But you keep glancing at the dark beyond the torchlight. Historians still argue whether castle guards genuinely feared nighttime attack, or if most watches were just an old form of theater to keep order. Either way, the fear feels real enough when the wind howls across the battlements and the dogs growl at something no one else can see. There are levels of night watch duty. The elite guards patrol the outer walls, dressed in mail, armed with long spears and a serious lack of humor. Then there are the inner keep guards, some older, some half asleep, who check for sneaky servants, roaming cats, and open shutters. Then there's the graveyard shift, those poor souls who stand at the top of the highest tower, watching for distant fires. It's the loneliest job in the castle. Cold, boring, and terrifying all at once. One night, you climb up there. Just to see. The sky stretches out forever, speckled with stars you swear you've never noticed before. You see the faint glow of another town, many miles off. Smoke from the blacksmith's chimney. A fox darting through the woods. And then, closer, something moves. A flicker in the trees. You freeze. A guard beside you doesn't react. Probably a deer, he mutters. Probably. But you don't sleep well that night. Not all midnight dangers are outside. Some come from within. You hear about an argument in the servants' quarters that ended with a broken stool and a black eye. A candle left burning in the laundry nearly starts a fire. A drunken squire mistakes the herb pantry for the guardrobe and nearly ruins a week's worth of rosemary. There's a quirky tradition you learn from one of the old guards. He taps 3 times on each doorframe he passes at night. Wards off spirits, he says. You laugh. He doesn't. By your second week of torch running, you can almost feel the castle breathing differently at night. The same way it wakes in layers in the morning, it sleeps in phases at night. It mutters, it creaks, it sighs. And every noise has meaning. The soft trickle of water in the cistern means it's full. The low groan from the gate pulley? That means the counterweight's slipping. Again. Someone will fix it tomorrow. Maybe. You begin to notice patterns. A certain owl always hoots twice before midnight. The wind shifts after 3. The torches in the west corridor always go out faster than the rest, no matter how much oil you pour. Some say it's a draft. Others say it's a curse. One night, you're walking with a young guard named Elric. He's new. Nervous. Keeps fiddling with his helmet strap. Do you think, he asks, that someone could sneak in? You consider. Maybe. Probably not. But the gate guards are only human. And the postern door near the armory still doesn't lock properly. You don't answer. You just walk a little faster. Then there are the truly odd nights. Like when the cook's cat leads an entire parade of other cats through the corridors, tails high like banners, all the way from the kitchens to the Lord's private stair. No one knows why. No one stops them. Or the night someone drops a full tankard from the upper balcony of the Great Hall. No one admits to it. But it hits the rushes with a splat and soaks a guard's boots. He's furious for a week. Sometimes you glimpse the chapel lit late. A figure kneels, head bowed. Silent. Praying for safety, or peace, or maybe just a warm meal tomorrow. You don't interrupt. There's a silent honor to the night guard. No one applauds. No one notices them unless something goes wrong. But without them, the castle wouldn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. They are the reason the rest of you can drift off in peace. One morning, as dawn creeps over the towers and the torches begin to sputter out, you sit on the rampart with a crust of bread and watch the light return. It paints the trees in gold. It turns the slate roofs blue. It makes the cold stones look briefly warm. A new day begins. And you, for once, feel like you earned your rest. You're just beginning to feel like you understand the rhythms of castle life, when to work, when to hide, when to slip into a shadow and let the chaos pass. But there's one area where all bets are off, where no one's safe and order goes to die. It's not the battlements. It's not the dungeons. It's the kitchens. And you? You just got reassigned there. You step into the heat, and it hits you like a wall, thick, oily, and full of smells you can't quite place. Some are pleasant, like roasted onion or fresh bread. Others, not so much. Is that fish? Is that yesterday's fish? Is that what's becoming fish? You can't tell. The castle kitchens are a world unto themselves. You quickly learn that they don't run on time or logic, they run on panic, instinct, and shouting. So much shouting. There are 3 kinds of kitchen workers: the lifers who've been here forever and know everything, the middle folk who juggle 10 tasks while dodging elbows, and the newbies, like you, who mostly carry things and try not to set anything on fire. Today, you're on vegetable duty. Sounds safe. It's not. You're handed a knife longer than your forearm and a basket of root vegetables that could double as medieval weapons. Your job: peel, slice, and not slice off your thumb. Easier said than done. The cook overseeing the prep bench is a woman named Tilda. She speaks in grunts, moves like a whirlwind, and knows the exact moment you're about to screw something up. Don't cut toward yourself, she barks. You flinch. Drop the parsnip. It rolls into someone's stew. No one notices. Or if they do, they pretend not to. Historians still argue whether medieval castle cooks had any formal training or if they just evolved naturally through exposure to stress and open flame. Judging by Tilda, it's the latter. She runs her domain like a warship, and today, you're the cabin boy scrubbing the deck with a potato. Mainstream fact time: most castles had at least 2 kitchens, one for the bulk of the household, and one for the lord and lady's private meals. You're working in the big one, feeding 300 mouths a day. That means vats the size of bathtubs, bread ovens like stone caves, and knives that look like they've seen battle. One of your first tasks is hauling water from the cistern to the scullery. Again and again and again. You lose count after the 6th trip. The buckets are iron. The water's heavy. And the stairs are steep enough to qualify as a personal insult. By the end, your arms are noodles and your tunic is soaked. But the scullery maids thank you, and one even hands you a slice of crust as a reward. It's stale, but you eat it like it's cake. Then comes firewood duty. The kitchens burn through an obscene amount of it. You help stack logs beside the hearths, hands blackened with soot. One of the older boys shows you a trick, how to tuck dry moss under the logs for a better flame. You try it, and for once, something doesn't go wrong. Of course, not everything's fire and soup. There's butchery, too. A lot of it. Some of it happens in the yard, but much comes inside, especially in winter. Today, it's poultry day. You watch in fascinated horror as a string of ducks are plucked, cleaned, and skewered for roasting. Feathers float in the air like some twisted snowstorm. You're assigned to clean up. It's sticky. You hear a rumor. Once, a kitchen boy tried to sneak off with a cooked duck leg. Tilda caught him, made him clean grease traps for a month. Worse than the stocks, someone whispers. You don't test the story. Then there's the bread room. Oh, the bread room. If the kitchen's a chaos, the bread room is its holy sanctuary. Warm, quiet, sweet-smelling. You step in, and it's like entering another world. Loaves line the shelves in neat rows, rye, barley, some even with honey or dried fruit. A baker with flour-streaked arms nods at you. Don't touch the loaves, he says. You don't. Your job today is to knead. And by knead, they mean throw yourself elbow deep into dough and beat it like it owes you money. It's messy, tiring, but strangely satisfying. After an hour, your back aches and your hair is full of flour, but you kind of love it. Quirky tidbit, some castle kitchens used carved wooden stamps to press family crests into bread loaves. A kind of medieval branding. You see one in a drawer, an iron dragon surrounded by stars. The dough doesn't need to be tasty, just recognizable. You wonder if the dragon bread tastes better. It doesn't. But it feels fancier. Dinner prep begins before lunch is even served. You help turn spit handles over the fire, where 2 whole boars roast slowly, their skin blistering and popping. The smell is heavenly, if you ignore the smoke in your eyes. A dog nearby whines and licks its chops. You understand. Then it's time to plate everything. Not in the artistic, dainty sense. Just heaping trenchers full and making sure nothing falls into the rushes. You carry platters into the great hall, past yawning guards and distracted pages. The nobles eat first, of course. But you know the staff table will get leftovers, and sometimes, that means the best bits. You've started to map out kitchen hierarchy. Tilda commands. Bakers do their own thing. Butchers scare everyone. The spit boys are strong but half-mad from heat. The scullery maids are underrated gods. And you? You're the new guy. For now. But by week's end, you've stopped flinching at shouting. You've stopped blinking when meat cleavers slam into cutting blocks. You've even managed to cut 3 onions in a row without crying, mostly. One night, you're mopping up after a feast when Tilda passes by, nods once, and mutters, "Not useless." It's the highest praise you've received in weeks. You go to bed smelling of smoke, sweat, and gravy. And honestly? You sleep like a stone. Because even in a castle filled with knights and nobles, the true power lies in the hands that stir the pot. The next day, you're reassigned again, because in a castle with 300 people, no job stays yours for long. One moment you're elbow deep in turnips, the next you're trudging through mud with a basket of horse apples. Today, however, you've been handed a broom and a warning. Stables, says a steward with a grimace. Hold your breath. He's not exaggerating. You walk down the sloped path that leads away from the central keep, past the blacksmith's forge and the outer granary, to a long, low building that somehow smells like damp hay, warm fur, and everything a horse can leave behind after a hearty oat breakfast. This is your new reality, the stables. They are loud, chaotic, and surprisingly political. Horses whinny, snort, stamp, and chew. Stable hands bark at one another, and there's always a bucket being kicked over somewhere. The soundscape alone could drive you to madness, but somehow it's also weirdly soothing, especially after the weaponized stress of the kitchen. Today's task? Muck stalls. Again and again. Which means a shovel, a wheelbarrow, and a keen awareness of what not to step in. You start to understand why some nobles wear boots so tall they nearly touch their kneecaps. It's not fashion. It's survival. As you shovel and sweat, you start to meet the residents, not the people, the horses. They're practically celebrities here. There's a glossy warhorse named Thorn, tall as a tower and meaner than a cornered boar. There's Belladonna, a swift, dappled mare with a manner that looks brushed by angels. And then there's Peace Pudding, the shaggy cart pony who steps on your foot the second you turn your back. Historians still argue whether castle stables were better maintained than the servant quarters. Judging by the fresh straw, constant repairs, and general affection shown to these animals, it's possible the horses had nicer accommodations than you do. The head groom is a man named Fergal. Bald, thick-muscled, perpetually chewing something. He sizes you up with a look that says, "I've seen 100 like you, and at least 20 of them quit." But you hang in there. Because honestly, after onion slicing and poultry guts, shoveling manure feels almost peaceful. There's rhythm to it. Scrape, toss, replace. The horses snort and flick their ears. Some let you scratch their noses. Others glare like you're beneath them, and let's be honest, you are, socially and physically. Fergal teaches you to currycomb, a method of brushing that looks like you're massaging the horse with a tiny, angry dinner plate. It's not glamorous, but it works. Peace Pudding loves it. Thorn tries to bite you. Twice. And just when you think you've earned a moment of calm, the farrier arrives. You don't expect a farrier to be terrifying, but this one, Matilda, is built like a siege tower and swings hammers like she's trying to wake the dead. She doesn't speak much, but her forge sparks like dragon breath every time a new shoe needs shaping. You help carry buckets of water and hold tools, careful not to get between her and the molten iron. You value your limbs. Mainstream fact, farriers were essential castle staff, experts in hoof care and metallurgy. A horse with a bad shoe could cost a noble dearly in war or travel. Matilda moves like someone who knows this, and everyone respects her, including the horses. Of course, not every horse gets shoes. Only the important ones, war horses, messengers, and anything that might be taken on a royal hunt. Peace Pudding? He walks barefoot, bless him. You get your first taste of castle politics when a knight storms into the stables, yelling about his gelding's limp. Fergal listens, nods politely, then mutters something under his breath about the silver-plated fools with zero stable sense. The horse, for the record, is just fine. Is limping for attention. That evening, a delivery arrives, grain, oats, sacks of hay. You help unload it all, sneezing every 3 seconds. One of the bags bursts and covers you in oat dust. A stable hand hands you a carrot and says, "Payment for your suffering." You eat it. It's not bad. Then comes tack duty. The saddles, bridles, bits, and harnesses that hang along the walls are a confusing jungle of straps, buckles, and buckskin. You polish them endlessly, pretending to understand which piece does what. One of the squires teaches you how to saddle up properly. You try. The horse ends up wearing the bridle backward. You both agree never to speak of it again. By now, you know who feeds at what time, who kicks if startled, and which stall you should avoid if you value dry boots. You even get a feel for the subtle language of the horses, when they twitch, when they tail snap, when they lean into you a little too affectionately. Quirky tidbit, some castles believed in horse whisperers, mystic types who could calm any steed with touch or song. Fergal claims he once saw a man put Thorn to sleep with a lullaby. You'd believe it if Thorn weren't still trying to eat you daily. By week's end, you smell permanently of hay and hooves. You've also learned how to tie 5 different knots, lead a horse without getting dragged, and, most impressively, how to dodge a flying pile of dung with reflexes that would impress even the castle's fencers. You start taking breaks in the hayloft, where the golden light filters through slats in the wall, and the air smells like sunshine and dust. You lie back, close your eyes, and listen to the muffled sounds below, hooves clopping, buckets sloshing, and the low murmur of stable hands trading stories. Sometimes, it feels like the stables are the castle's lungs. Always in motion, never quite at rest. Every visitor who arrives, every messenger who departs, every cart of grain or bale of wool, it all passes through here. It's a world behind the walls, beneath the finery, essential and invisible. One morning, just as the mist begins to rise from the fields and the horses nicker softly in their stalls, Fergal claps a hand on your shoulder and says, "You haven't broken anything in 2 days." That's a record. You beam. Mud-smeared and sore, but proud. Because in a place with 300 souls, everyone plays a part. And yours, for now, is to shovel, groom, and dodge. And somehow, that feels just right. Your first instinct, when they tell you what's next, is to fake a limp or feign plague. Anything to avoid this particular assignment. Because now, you're on laundry duty. You thought the kitchens were chaotic. You thought the stables were dirty. But laundry? Laundry is a perfect storm of boiling water, lye burns, gossip louder than any trumpet, and undergarments of all shapes, sizes, and mysterious stains. You report for duty just after dawn, where steam already rises from giant cauldrons like eerie morning fog. The laundry yard is tucked behind the castle's southern wall, close to the rain barrels and waste trenches, because let's be honest, nobody wants to smell this place. A woman named Olwen greets you. She's wiry, barefoot, and looks like she could punch a wolf unconscious. "You're the one from the stables?" she asks. You nod. Good. Then you already stink. And just like that, you're handed a paddle. Laundry isn't just tossing things in a tub and humming a tune. It's labor. Physical, relentless, unglamorous labor. You start by hauling water. Again. It's becoming your personal brand. Barrels, buckets, basins, all full of water that needs to be poured into the fire-heated cauldrons. Your shoulders beg for mercy by hour 2. Then comes the lye. A soapy, skin-peeling mixture made from ashes and water. It stings like guilt and leaves your hands redder than a knight's banner. But without it, there's no hope of cleaning a noble's sweat-soaked tunic or a servant's grease-stained apron. One mainstream fact you probably didn't expect: most large castles had dedicated laundry areas staffed by full-time laundresses, and in some cases, even specialized linen stewards who tracked every item like it was royal treasure. Considering how rare and expensive cloth could be, especially fine linen, laundry was high-stakes work. You're quickly taught how to use a washing bat, basically a wooden oar that you slap clothes with, over and over, in rhythm. At first, it feels violent. Then, oddly satisfying. There's a tempo to it, like drumming with soap bubbles. Olwen tells you, between slaps, that noble women sometimes sent special underclothes to be washed in rosewater. You glance at the grey, crunchy pile of woolen socks you're pounding and think, yeah, this isn't that kind of laundry. And it's not just washing. There's sorting, too. Which, in a castle of 300 people, is basically archaeology. You unfold one tunic and a frog hops out. Another is so stiff it could walk on its own. You find gloves missing fingers, and a pair of hose with more patches than fabric. Then comes drying. There are lines strung across the yard, fluttering like flags of surrender. The laundry flaps in the breeze, massive underpants, delicate veils, woolen leggings stretched to their limits. Your job is to hang each piece with care, unless you want Olwen shouting that Lord Alric's sleeves are dragging in horse muck again. As you work, you overhear everything. Gossip is the true detergent of the laundry yard. Servants trade rumors like coin. A knight was caught sneaking into the scullery at night. The cook's assistant has a crush on the falconer. Someone thinks the Lord's youngest son is actually the result of a very scandalous pilgrimage. You're quiet at first, but eventually someone nudges you. You hear about the linen mix-up? They gave the lady's nightgown to the stable master. Said it smelled like lavender and horse sweat. Everyone cackles. You laugh too, quietly, because Olwen has the hearing of a hawk and the temperament of a badger. Quirky tidbit time. Some noble families embroidered tiny symbols inside their garments, secret marks so no one else would mistake them. You spot one today, a stitched blue flower on a hemline, hidden like a whisper. By midday, you've also learned about boiling. Boiling linens, especially anything touched by nobles, is a sacred rite. The cauldrons bubble ominously, and you're warned, several times, not to let the water run dry. Unless you fancy the smell of burning breeches, someone says. It's a hot, sweaty, almost scalding job. You stir the cloth with a long stick, like a witch brewing a potion made entirely of socks. When you're done, your face is pink and your arms feel like soup noodles. Historians still argue whether lower-ranking folk truly wash their clothes as often as records suggest. Some argue that castle laundry lists are inflated to impress royal guests, others believe that cleanliness really was next to godliness, especially in religious households. Either way, you're pretty sure nothing in this yard has ever been described as clean by modern standards. Eventually, you're trusted with folding. Which sounds peaceful, but isn't. There's a right way to fold everything. Tunics are rolled. Linen sheets are stacked. Undergarments are folded with near monastic care. Everything gets bundled and returned to its proper location. Woe unto the person who misplaces a noble's embroidered handkerchief. You're given a list, scrawled in a hurried hand, and sent walking all over the castle delivering fresh garments. You knock on wooden doors, duck into dark hallways, and pass room after room of flickering torchlight. At one chamber, a stern maid grabs a stack without looking. Finally, she says, "I've been wearing the same shift for 3 days." You don't ask questions. You move on. Later that night, you help bring in the dry clothes before a storm rolls in. The sky is heavy with clouds, and the first fat drops start to fall just as the last tunic comes down. Olwen gives you an approving grunt. It's the medieval version of a gold star. You sit near the fire afterward, sore and damp but oddly at peace. There's something grounding about the laundry yard. It's a space of transformation, not just for cloth, but for people too. You came in grumbling and bruised. You leave knowing which soap works best on meat stains and how to remove wax from velvet. There's a kind of magic in that. You fall asleep that night with the phantom smell of lavender lie in your nose and the image of endless white sheets rippling in the wind. And just like that, you've added another title to your growing resume: shovel wielder, bread kneader, hoof scraper, and now, full-fledged washer of bloomers. You wake up sore from elbow to earlobe. Your hands still smell faintly of soap, and your dreams were filled with endless lines of flapping laundry. But there's no time to dwell, because this morning, you've been summoned to the castle walls. And not just to stroll along them like a scenic overlook, no, you're joining the garrison. Well, kind of. You're not getting a sword, not even a dull one, and no one's handing you armor, but you are getting a long pike, a worn leather cap, and a cheerful warning: if it comes to an actual siege, just yell and duck. So up you go. You climb narrow spiral stairs that seem to go on forever, until you emerge into cold wind and wide sky. The parapets stretch out on either side, framing a view that's both breathtaking and terrifying. Below, the countryside unfolds like a tapestry: farmland, forest, the winding river. But up here? Up here, you're a speck on a wall meant to survive fire, arrows, and time itself. Welcome to guard rotation. Life on the walls is its own strange rhythm. Most guards do 6-hour shifts, which means standing still, pacing slowly, or, if you're lucky, leaning somewhere out of the wind while pretending to be watchful. The rule is simple: don't fall asleep. And if you do, don't get caught. Because castle punishment for sleeping on guard? Let's just say it usually involves stocks and very public humiliation. You meet a grizzled man named Weimar, who has been guarding the wall for so long his skin seems carved from granite. He's the one who teaches you how to spot trouble, smoke where there shouldn't be smoke, glints of metal in trees, or worst of all, banners. The wrong banner on the horizon can turn breakfast into battle. Mainstream fact: the castle wall's primary purpose wasn't just to look imposing, it was a full-blown defense platform. Guards patrolled constantly, especially during times of unrest or war. Some castles even had signal towers to communicate with distant allies using fire or flags. It wasn't just a wall, it was the castle's eyes. Weimar hands you a crude spyglass. "Only one in the garrison," he says. "Don't drop it, or I'll feed you to the cook." You laugh, then realize he might be serious. As you peer through it, the world zooms in. You spot farmers tending a field, a rider kicking up dust on a distant road, even a flock of geese waddling through someone's herb patch. It's like spying on a dollhouse world, but you're very much part of it. Of course, wall duty isn't all panoramic views and peeking. There's maintenance, too. You're handed a bucket of sand and a broom. Turns out, sand helps keep the stone walkway dry and less slippery. You also scrub pigeon droppings off the merlons, those little upright teeth-shaped parts on the wall. Not glamorous, but important. Pigeon poop, apparently, is the enemy of long-lasting masonry. At midday, another quirky aspect of garrison life appears: wall snacks. Someone brings up a bundle wrapped in linen. Inside? Cold meat pies, dried apples, and something that tastes vaguely like onion but crunches like bark. Weimar calls it soldier's jawbreaker. You're not sure if it's food or punishment. But you eat it anyway, because when you're standing in a gusty tower with nothing but stone for company, even bad food is a blessing. You also learn how to ring the alarm bell. It's heavy iron and loud enough to shatter sleep across the whole compound. "Only ring it if you're certain," says Weimar. Last lad who rang it for a runaway sheep nearly lost an ear. Duly noted. That afternoon, your legs ache from standing, but your mind wanders less. You've started watching birds ride the wind currents, memorizing the shapes of distant treetops. You spot 2 deer grazing near the edge of the woods, their coats glowing in the sun. You become part of the landscape's rhythm. And then, suddenly, something does happen. A rider approaches. Fast. Dust curls up behind him like smoke. He's not from the castle, no livery, no banner. You and another guard exchange glances. One runs to alert the gatehouse. The rider is let in, cautiously, as crossbows peer down from murder holes above the gate. Turns out, he's a messenger from a neighboring lord. There's been raiding on the northern border. Bandits, or maybe soldiers disguised as such. No one's sure. Historians still argue whether castle garrisons were primarily defensive or simply ceremonial during peace times. Some think guards spent more time showing off than shooting arrows. But when messengers arrive breathless and dusty, you start to understand why vigilance matters. After the excitement dies down, you're taught how to load and crank a ballista, a giant crossbow mounted to the wall. It's ancient, creaky, and probably hasn't fired in years. But the mechanics are fascinating. You help reload it with a bolt the size of a broomstick, wondering if you'll ever need to actually use it. You also get a crash course in boiling oil protocol. Spoiler alert, castles didn't actually dump oil, too expensive. But water, sand, and sometimes even quicklime? Definitely. 1 bucket of quicklime is kept covered near the gate. Only use if they try climbing, says Weimar. Just don't breathe when you toss it. Yikes. And then there's the night watch. They assign you second shift, midnight to dawn. Cold seeps into your bones. Every sound feels louder. The creak of wood, the howl of wind, the occasional owl. You wrap yourself in a spare cloak, grip your pike, and fight sleep like it owes you money. You're not alone. 2 other guards keep you company. One sings softly. Another tells stories. They talk about past battles, ghosts that walk the ramparts, and a time a cat set off the alarm bell by jumping on the rope. It sounds ridiculous, but you kinda believe it. Quirky tidbit: some castle garrisons kept cats on purpose, not just for rats, but as early warning systems. Cats, apparently, get twitchy when something's off. Weimar once trusted a ginger tabby more than the South Tower Scout. And the tabby was usually right. As dawn breaks, the sky turning pale pink behind the hills, you let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. You made it through the night. You didn't fall asleep. You didn't ring the bell for a cloud shaped like a warhorse. And the sun feels earned. When you're finally relieved, Weimar claps your shoulder and says, "Not bad for a laundress." It's the closest thing to a compliment you've heard from him. You trudge down the stairs, every step echoing through the stone. Your legs are numb, your eyes blurry, but there's a small, quiet pride settling into your chest. You stood guard on a medieval fortress. You watched the world from a perch of history. And more importantly, you didn't drop the spyglass. You sleep like a rock. A rock buried under a haystack. A rock that, quite frankly, deserves better. When you wake, it's late morning, and there's a dull ache in your shoulders from gripping that pike all night. But no time for stretching or yawning. Today, they need bodies in the craftsman's yard. You arrive to the smell of hot iron, wet clay, and fresh sawdust. It's not a single shop, but a bustling corner of the castle near the inner bailey where half a dozen tradesfolk work at once, each surrounded by piles of tools, raw materials, and half-finished masterpieces. Today, you're not here to watch. You're here to assist. The first stop? The blacksmith's forge. Inside, it's sweltering. A man named Hal grunts a greeting without looking up, hammering red-hot iron on an anvil with the kind of rhythm that would make a drummer weep. Sparks fly. Your eyebrows flinch. You immediately understand why this part of the castle always smells faintly of roast boots. Your job? Bellows duty. You stand beside the forge and work a long wooden lever that pumps air into the coals. More air means more heat, and more heat means iron softens just enough to shape. But it's no gentle puff, it's like wrestling a wooden accordion that's angry you woke it from a nap. Your arms are jelly in no time. Hal shapes a horseshoe, then a nail, then some vaguely dangerous-looking spikes. You ask what they're for. Defenses, he says, or maybe the cook's skewer rack. Depends who gets here first. Mainstream fact, blacksmiths in castles weren't just farriers making horseshoes, they crafted armor, weapons, hinges, nails, locks, tools, and even surgical instruments. In many castles, the smith was one of the most valued tradesmen, second only to the master mason. You're not quite ready to bang on hot metal, but Hal lets you plunge a finished piece into the water trough. The hiss it makes is deeply satisfying, like the forge is sighing. Next, you're passed along to the carpenter. She's called Merwin, and she's fashioning a new oaken doorframe after a servant snapped the last one by leaning too hard, which sounds like either an accident or a very bad day. Her hands are calloused, her sleeves rolled, and she hands you a chisel with zero explanation. You spend the next hour learning to shave beams smooth, stack timber, and avoid stepping on nails. Carpentry is quieter than the forge, but no less intense. Merwin works with a kind of stern elegance, every tap of her mallet feels intentional, every measurement precise. You help shape a new wooden latch and fit it to a half-finished door. It clicks. It holds. It actually works. Not bad, she says, which, you're learning, is craftsman speak for you didn't ruin it. Quirky tidbit, some castle carpenters also served as early engineers, building siege machines like trebuchets or drawbridge counterweights. According to Merwin, her grandfather once made a catapult out of fishing nets and pig bones. You choose to believe her. Next stop, the pottery corner, tucked beside the bakehouse. Here, you meet Thomas, a potter with clay-streaked elbows and a habit of whistling hymns while working. He's shaping pitchers today, tall, thin-necked, perfect for wine or water or dramatically spilling during courtly arguments. You sit at the wheel, just briefly, hands slick with water, and try your best not to produce something that looks like a collapsed muffin. It's harder than it looks. Your first attempt wobbles, your second caves in, and your third actually holds its shape. Kind of. Historians still argue whether potters in castles were internal staff or traveling tradesmen. Some records suggest permanent pottery workshops, especially in larger estates. Others claim most wares were bought from nearby towns. Either way, making a pot is no joke, and making a matching set? Practically wizardry. You help Thomas arrange finished pots in the kiln, which looks like a brick igloo with fire inside. He seals the door and marks the hour on a piece of chalkboard. 20 hours, he says. Then we see if the clay gods were merciful. You cross your fingers. After lunch, cold meat, crusty bread, no forks. As usual, you're sent to the tanners. You think you're ready? You are wrong. Even before you reach the space behind the outer wall where the tanners work, the smell hits you. It's unique. A violent mix of rotting flesh, ammonia, wet leather, and despair. Your eyes water. Your stomach contemplates mutiny. Tanning, you learn, is the process of turning animal hides into leather. It's a long, foul journey involving urine, quicklime, and lots of scraping. You hold your breath as long as you can while helping a tanner named Edith scrape fur from a soaked deer hide. It feels like rubbing raw chicken with a spatula. You ask if it ever gets easier. No, she says cheerfully. But you get used to smelling like a stable accident. You also learn that after soaking, hides are stretched and dried on racks. Then comes the tanning itself, often using tree bark, sometimes even brain tissue. 1 brain per hide, Edith says. Which means somewhere out there is a really well-dressed pig. You decide not to ask follow-ups. Quirky tidbit, some medieval tanners swore by dog droppings for softening hides. Others preferred pigeon poop. You're starting to realize that a lot of castle life was held together by very gross secrets. Later, you meet a mason, working on a repair to the outer wall. His name's Jorin, and he has the hands of a stone god and the patience of a sleep-deprived monk. He shows you how to mix lime mortar, crunchy, crumbly, messy, and helps you smooth it between the stones like icing on a very depressing cake. You balance on a scaffold, slowly gaining a feel for the rock's weight, its angle, its placement. Castle stones are often irregular, and fitting them together is less like Lego and more like a 3D jigsaw puzzle where each piece weighs 30 pounds. Mainstream fact, castles constantly needed repairs, walls cracked, battlements eroded, and water seeped through towers. Masons were essential, and often traveled from site to site, leaving behind carved signatures in secret spots. Some even acted as architects. Your hands ache by sundown, but as you look back across the yard, it hits you, every object you've touched, every latch, pot, plank, stone, matters. These aren't background details. They're what make the castle livable. You helped rebuild the walls. You shaped the water jugs. You kept the heat going and the hinges turning. No one may remember your name, but your fingerprints are now part of this place. You fall asleep dreaming of chisels and sparks and lopsided pottery. And for once, you don't smell like onions or horses. Just clay. The rain starts before dawn. You know because it drips through a crack in the dormitory ceiling and lands, like clockwork, on your forehead. You roll over, groaning, but someone calls from below, up. Chapel bell in 10. That's not an invitation, it's an order. Today, you're heading into the spiritual heart of the castle, the chapel. A small stone building nestled near the inner wall, the chapel isn't just a religious space, it's where people come to confess sins, pray before battles, bless harvests, mourn losses, and occasionally doze during sermons. It's also one of the only places in the entire castle where silence is strictly enforced, unless you're a goose, in which case no one can stop you. You trudge through the wet courtyard and duck into the chapel. It smells of beeswax and damp stone. Candles flicker on a narrow altar. A stained glass window, cracked and half repaired, filters the grey morning light into dreamy reds and golds. Even in the storm, the place feels warm, spiritually, if not physically. You're greeted by Brother Alric, the castle chaplain. He's old, kindly, and has the kind of voice that makes you want to confess things you didn't even do. You'll assist with morning prayers, he says. And then we'll prepare for the Lord's blessing. You help light candles and arrange small bowls of holy water. you sweep the stone floor and lay out a threadbare rug near the altar. Then, Brother Ulrich hands you a worn prayer book, illuminated with gold leaf lettering and delicate margin doodles of saints, angels, and, oddly, a very chubby rabbit in chainmail. Mainstream fact: most large castles had private chapels and a full-time chaplain. Nobles were expected to attend services regularly, and religion shaped everything from laws to mealtimes. Monks often served as record keepers and advisors, too, like spiritual administrators. As the chapel fills, you recognize faces: the steward, the cook's daughter, even that cranky stable boy who once threw a beat at your foot. Everyone kneels, and Brother Ulrich begins chanting the morning psalm in Latin. You fumble through the words, mumbling more than reading, but no one seems to mind. After prayers, a small procession begins. Lord Ulrich arrives, followed by his family and 2 guards in their best tunics. He kneels. You're amazed. For a moment, the lines between high and low blur, and the entire castle breathes as one. You help Ulrich pass around a platter of bread and pour watered wine from a carved chalice. It's more symbolic than filling, but the ritual brings a strange comfort, even to those who've been scrubbing pots all week. Quirky tidbit: not all religious observances were peaceful. Some nobles funded elaborate pilgrimage simulations within castle walls, complete with symbolic stations and relics, real or forged. According to rumor, one castle chapel kept a toenail said to belong to St. Cuthbert. Was it really his? Historians still argue whether many relics were authentic or just very old leftovers. Later, you help Brother Ulrich with his real duties. Because he's not just the chapel leader, he's also the scribe. The scriptorium is a tiny room behind the chapel, filled with parchment, ink pots, and feather quills. Ulrich copies texts, religious scrolls, noble records, letters to neighboring castles. His Latin is graceful, his handwriting like ivy. You, however, spill ink on the first word you attempt. He chuckles and hands you a scrap of parchment to practice. You copy the word Benedictus 20 times before it stops looking like a wounded spider. Ulrich shows you how to trim a quill and blend ink using oak galls and vinegar. He even lets you try illuminating a margin, just a curling vine and a gold dot. You're beaming like a child with a gold star. Be glad you weren't born a monk, he says. They did this for 12 hours a day. Historians still argue whether medieval scribes were appreciated artists or just glorified copy machines. One thing's certain: they preserved knowledge that might have vanished without them. By midday, your wrists ache from careful writing, and your stomach growls. You're about to leave when Ulrich pulls you aside. Come, he says. It's time for a blessing. You follow him to a tower chamber where Lady Edwin lies pale in bed, her face drawn with illness. A maid whispers, fever hasn't broken. Ulrich kneels beside her, murmuring prayers in Latin, anointing her brow with oil. You hand him a cloth. The room smells of lavender and something metallic, an herbal salve, maybe. You stand very still. Moments like this remind you that medieval life wasn't just about walls and weapons. It was also fragile. Hope clung to herbs, prayers, and the quiet kindness of strangers. Later, you're asked to clean the chapel's reliquary, a carved wooden box said to hold sacred items. Inside are worn cloth scraps, a silver tooth, and what looks suspiciously like a chicken bone. Still, everyone treats it with reverence. It's not what it is, Ulrich says, it's what it means. By now, you know, meaning holds castles together more than stone. As dusk falls, preparations begin for evening vespers. The whole castle seems to move slower. Light dims, voices quiet. You help carry new candles and ring a handbell to call people in. The storm has passed. A pale moon rises. The chapel glows like a lantern in the dark. Everyone files in again, the day's labor behind them, their clothes still dusted with flour or soot or hay. But now they're just souls, waiting to be soothed. The final chant rises, and for a moment, just a moment, it feels like the world outside doesn't exist. Just you, and flickering flame, and a chant that winds like smoke into the stars. You walk back across the courtyard alone, and for once, the castle feels still. You stop to look back at the chapel. A single window still glows. And you realize, today, you helped light that. Your eyes blink open before the rooster even crows, because today you've been assigned to the castle kitchens. Now, before you start picturing yourself chewing on roasted chicken legs and nibbling warm apple tarts in the corner, let's reset expectations. You're not here to feast. You're here to sweat. And possibly cry, depending on how much onion peeling is involved. You duck into the lower levels of the castle, where the warm glow of the hearth already pulses through the corridor. The kitchen is cavernous, with a huge open fire at one end, glowing red under a steel pot the size of a well. The air smells like smoke, garlic, and faintly like singed eyebrows. A wooden spit spins lazily over the coals, and somewhere in the corner, you hear a chicken scream in a way that can only mean too late. The cook, everyone just calls her Matilda, is already yelling before you've taken your second step inside. Don't just stand there. Get the turnips. You scramble to obey, grabbing a sack of vegetables from a cold pantry carved into the stone wall. The air in there is sharp and damp and smells like mold and destiny. You emerge clutching turnips, which you then proceed to peel, cube, and toss into a cauldron that could swallow a goat. There's no menu here. Just massive bulk cooking to feed around 300 people, most of them too hungry to complain. Today's stew includes barley, onions, wild herbs, and is that rabbit? You don't ask. Mainstream fact, medieval castle kitchens were industrial-level operations. In larger castles, the staff could include dozens of assistants, scullions, spitboys, bakers, brewers, larders, and sauciers. The head cook was a master of logistics, flavor, and fire management all at once. You're handed a long wooden spoon that looks like a canoe paddle and instructed to keep it from sticking. The pot hisses. You sweat. It sticks anyway. Matilda glares. Then comes bread. Castle bread isn't your soft, fluffy, modern loaf. It's dense, dark, and defensive. You could probably use it to knock out a raccoon. Bakers work before dawn, pounding rye and barley dough, using sourdough starters older than some of the stable boys. You try shaping a round loaf and end up with something closer to a soggy hat. Not terrible, says one baker, which now feels like the highest praise possible. You help stack finished loaves in baskets lined with scratchy linen. The scent of fresh bread is incredible. You can't help yourself, you tear off a corner. Still warm. A bit sour. Heaven. Then, someone hands you a broom. Time for cleanup. You're down on your knees scrubbing onion skins and pig fat off stone floors with a stiff bristled brush. Scullions around you argue about who gets the last marrow bone. One girl sneaks a pinch of salt into her apron. Another boy keeps accidentally licking his fingers. Quirky tidbit, in wealthier castles, some kitchens had separate rooms for boiling, baking, brewing, even a pastry room for fine dishes. But in most places, it was chaos crammed into one hall, heat, smoke, shouting, and very few spoons. By midday, your tunic smells like lamb, and you're positive there's lard in your hair. And then, the feast bell rings. It's not a special occasion, just the main meal of the day, served around late morning for the nobles and, much later, to the staff. You carry platters into the great hall, balancing bowls of stew, baskets of bread, pitchers of wine, and trays of boiled vegetables. The noble family sits at the high table on a raised dais, their dishes slightly fancier, maybe a pie with a pastry crest, or meat spiced with imported cinnamon. You stand off to the side and watch as Lord Eelric dips a spoon, nods once, and eats. No complaints. Matilda looks smug. Historians still argue whether medieval nobles ate as lavishly as old paintings suggest. Some records show rare delicacies, others stress how common porridge and stale bread were, even among the elite. Either way, spices were a status symbol, or pepper, saffron, nutmeg, even sugar. Later, it's your turn to eat. Down in the servants' quarters, bowls are passed around with casual speed. There's less meat, more barley, and definitely no pie crusts with family crests, but it's filling. And hot. And after a morning in the kitchens, it tastes like salvation. You sit beside the stable girl, a young man from the gatehouse, and 2 laundry maids. Everyone eats quietly. You learn that Matilda once threw a cleaver at someone for oversalting the porridge. You also learn that yesterday's stew was technically Tuesday's stew with different herbs. You don't care. You finish every drop. After lunch, you help in the buttery and pantry, strange names for storage areas where wine, ale, dried goods, and pickles live. A young man named you and shows you how to tap a barrel of ale without spraying yourself in the face. You fail once. Only once. The pantry is cool and dry, lined with shelves holding jars of pickled onions, dried apples, and salted meat packed so tightly it resembles a meat brick. You help tally up supplies on a slate board. Enough lentils to bury a bishop, you and jokes. Quirky tidbit, the term butler comes from bottler, the man in charge of the buttery. He wasn't just a fancy waiter, he managed all liquid stores, from ale to imported wine, and his word was law when it came to drink. Before the day ends, you peek into the brew house. It smells like wet bread, yeasty and sour. 2 older women stir a bubbling vat of barley mash. Ale is safer than water, they explain. Boiling kills the nasties. You ask what nasties? They just smile. You decide to let it go. You try stirring. It's heavy, sticky, and strangely hypnotic. One woman hums a song about a drunken night and a goat. You'll be humming it for days. Then it's back to the kitchens for evening cleanup. You scrape bones into a slop bucket, destined for the pigs, scrub wooden plates with sand and lye, and stack pewter cups like you're playing the saddest tower game ever. Finally, Matilda lets you go. You stumble out into the evening air, arms sore, stomach full, clothes completely soaked in the scent of garlic, mutton, and vinegar. You lie on the cool grass for a moment, watching stars start to flicker into place. Your hands are cracked. Your knees ache. But the castle has been fed. Because of you. Okay, mostly because of Matilda. But you helped. And tomorrow, maybe you even get to try making that apple tart. Just maybe. The morning air tastes like ash and iron, and you already know, today, you're heading to the forge. Not the glamorous night training yard, or the majestic halls of courtly drama. No, you're about to step into the beating, clanging, slightly terrifying heart of castle maintenance, the blacksmith's domain. You follow the soot trails past the stables, and the smell hits first, hot metal, burnt leather, and the unmistakable tang of sweat that has given up trying to be subtle. The forge squats like a dragon's cave tucked into one of the outer buildings, stone walls blackened by years of flame, iron tools hanging from wooden pegs like medieval bats. The blacksmith, his name's Oswin, is already at it. Bare arms, anvil-polished apron, and a scowl that suggests he hasn't smiled since the last crusade. He waves you over with a thick finger. Bellows. That's your job this morning, pumping the massive leather and wood contraption that feeds the forge fire with air. You give it a few hesitant pumps. Harder, he barks. It's a forge, not a tea party. The coals roar to life like a sleeping beast just got poked. Oswin shoves a length of metal into the heart of the fire. It glows red, then orange, then a blinding white. You feel the heat from 6 feet away. Your eyebrows are not okay. Mainstream fact, every castle had a blacksmith, or more often, several. Their job wasn't just making swords. They produced horseshoes, nails, locks, hinges, tools, armor fittings, arrowheads, and occasionally those weird little keys no one remembers what they unlock. Oswin is working on horseshoes today, 3 dozen of them for the Lord's stables. He moves like a dance, heat, hammer, quench, repeat. You watch the glowing metal twist under his tools like it's made of clay. It's kind of beautiful, in a dangerous way. When he finally lets you try shaping one, the metal has cooled too much. Your blow bounces off with a weak ping. Strike like you mean it, Oswin says. You grit your teeth and try again. It's slightly better. He nods once. Progress. Then come repairs. A guard appears, chainmail in hand. Needs mending. Again. Oswin growls. Tell him to stop sleeping in it. You help lay the chainmail out on a thick wooden block. Up close, you realize it's not a bunch of tiny rings. It's 1,000,000 tiny rings. Each one woven with maddening precision. Some are broken or rusted. You try to link new ones using special pliers. Your fingers cramp after 4 links. Quirky tidbit, chainmail was so labor-intensive that broken sections were often passed down and repaired for generations. Some smiths used urine, yes, urine, to help remove rust. Not exactly a spa treatment. Oswin laughs when you ask. Only the fancy types waste wine on rust. Peasants use what's handy. You move on to sharpening tools, spades, hoes, carving knives. The sharpening wheel spins as you press metal to stone, watching sparks fly. It's like fireworks, but noisier and with slightly higher chances of losing a finger. Next, the armory. You're told to carry a stack of helmets, ridged, heavy, and echoey like bells. You line them on a bench while Oswin inspects them for cracks. One has a dent that looks suspiciously fist-sized. Bar fight, someone mutters. You help polish them using wool and lard, yes, lard, and while it smells like bacon, it works. Soon, they gleam in the firelight. Historians still argue whether armor was custom-fitted for everyone, or just padded to sort of fit whoever was alive enough to wear it. Truth is, nobles got tailored suits. Common soldiers got the medieval version of hand-me-downs and hope. Later, you meet Oswin's apprentice, Lyle. He's your age, grinning, missing 2 teeth. Broke a finger last week, he says proudly. Doing nothing heroic. Lyle teaches you how to temper steel, heating it to the exact right color, they call it straw gold, then quenching it in oil or water. Get it wrong, and it becomes brittle. Get it right, and it'll last longer than the castle. Some days I feel like a god, Lyle jokes, other days, I set my shoes on fire. You stay until dusk, soot on your face, arms sore from bellows and hammers and hauling iron scraps. But just as you're about to leave, Oswin calls you back. He holds out something small, a dagger, still warm, its handle plain, its blade sharp enough to part air. You made most of this, he says. Keep it. You stare. No one's ever handed you a weapon before. Quirky tidbit, daggers were the most common weapon of all, not just for fighting, but for eating, carving, whittling, and very occasionally, threatening people in the cheese line. Every peasant had one, but nobles often wore elaborately decorated ones just to show off. You slide it into your belt, feeling both taller and slightly more likely to poke yourself accidentally. Then someone rushes in from the guard tower, we need arrowheads. Oswin groans. Of course we do. Back to the forge. You help shape dozens of them from narrow iron rods, hammering them flat and sharp. Your ears ring. Your hands blister. But by the end of the night, you have forged over 50 lethal triangles. The castle sleeps as you finish tidying the forge. You sweep up iron shavings, hang tools in perfect order, and feed the last of the coals. In the quiet glow of the forge, your reflection shimmers in a polished breastplate hanging on the wall. You look ridiculous. And strong. And very, very dirty. You walk back across the courtyard, dagger at your side, arms trembling, face smudged. And when you collapse into your straw mattress, your dreams are made of fire. You're awakened before dawn by something that sounds like thunder. Not sky thunder, stone thunder. Today, you're not mucking stables or scrubbing pots. You're with the masons. And they don't deal in flour or chickens or shiny chainmail. They deal in the castle itself. You meet them in the bailey, where stacks of quarried stone wait like giant sugar cubes, if sugar cubes weighed 400 pounds and could crush a man flat. The master mason, a stocky older fellow named Ranulph, greets you with a grunt and a chalk mark to the chest, so I remember who the new one is. Great! You're marked for life. Or at least for today. The first thing you learn, stone doesn't move easily. You try to roll a block the size of a mini-fridge. It doesn't roll. It laughs at you. Eventually, Ranulf lets you use the block and tackle, a system of ropes, pulleys, and muscles. You hoist the block 3 feet in the air, then lower it again, slower than a turtle on vacation. Mainstream fact: medieval masons were highly skilled, respected workers. Their knowledge of geometry, balance, and pressure loads made castles possible. The best were hired across kingdoms, sometimes paid more than knights. Some could even read architectural plans, rare in an era where many nobles couldn't read their own names. You walk the ramparts with Ranulf, who points to places that still need work. "See that crack?" he says. You nod. Caused by frost, lazy mortar work, and 3 decades of pigeon poop. You do not nod again. Down in the workshop, the sound of chisels echoes like woodpeckers in a canyon. Sparks fly as stone is shaped into blocks, curves, and corbels. You're handed a lump of limestone and a flat chisel. Your job: carve a drainage spout. You stare at it. Into what? Ranulf shrugs. I dunno. Make it a lion. You chip. You tap. You squint. After an hour, it looks less like a lion and more like a sheep with rage issues. Not bad, says one apprentice, if the castle gets invaded by angry pillows. Quirky tidbit: some masons, especially cathedral builders, snuck in a mason's marks, tiny carved symbols hidden in stonework, like medieval graffiti. No one's sure if it was for pride, tracking pay, or just mischief. Some castles still have little smiling faces hiding under arches. By mid-morning, you're helping mix mortar. It's a sticky paste made from lime, sand, and water, sometimes mixed with hair, egg whites, or milk for extra strength. Today, it smells like old goat cheese and sadness. Your arms ache from stirring. You get mortar on your tunic, in your nose, and somehow in your boot. You now understand why the other masons wear full aprons and boots made of whatever armor is lying around. Ranulf shows you how to spread mortar on a wall in progress. He layers it, taps the stone, adjusts it with a level, and steps back. Not too bad, he mutters. You try next. Your stone sinks to one side like a drunken cow. Ranulf tilts his head. That's innovative. You eat lunch with the masons on the scaffolding. Rough bread, cold meat, a hunk of cheese wrapped in cloth, and lukewarm ale. One mason claims he once worked on a castle in Normandy with a secret tunnel under the moat. Another says he once dropped a stone block on a baron's foot and lived to tell the tale. Historians still argue whether medieval masons used elaborate plans or mostly worked from memory and hand-drawn sketches. Some evidence shows full blueprints, but many smaller castles were built more organically, layer by layer, wall by wall, with "let's just try it" as the official motto. In the afternoon, you climb higher, to help inspect the crenellations. That's the battlement stuff, the zigzag top of the wall with gaps called merlons and embrasures. They're for archers, but also for showing off. If your castle has fancy battlements, it says, "We're rich and dangerous." You crawl out along the top wall, dizzy from the height. You hammer in a fresh wedge where a stone has come loose. A seagull stares at you the whole time, clearly judging. On your way down, Ranulf gives you a bucket and points to a corner tower. You're on pigeon duty. Yes, it's what it sounds like. You clean out nests, droppings, and, occasionally, angry pigeons. One flies at your face like a feathered dart. You scream. The pigeon wins. You find a little nook in the stone wall and discover an old mason's mark, a star inside a circle. You trace it with your finger, wondering who carved it. A century ago? 2. Did they also get stuck with pigeon duty? As sunset nears, you help repair a wooden scaffolding beam. You hoist, brace, and tie knots that a sailor would weep over. When it holds, Ranulf gives you a rare nod. That'll stand through a storm. You beam. Then he adds, probably. The day ends with one last walk around the grounds. Ranulph explains the importance of drainage channels, showing you a clever system that channels rainwater off roofs, through spouts, and into hidden underground tunnels. Castles rot from the bottom, he says. Keep the water out, and she stands for centuries. You glance up at the tower silhouetted against the darkening sky, the banners limp in the cooling wind. The stones look eternal, but you know better now. Every block is placed by hand. Every wall repaired by sawbacks and splintered fingers. And today, you helped hold it all together. You return to your bunk dust-covered and elbow-bruised, with the faintest shape of a lion carved on a stone chip in your pocket. You made a piece of the castle. You'll sleep like a rock. You don't hear the rooster today. What you do hear is the whisper of linen, the splash of water in silver bowls, and the soft hum of chambermaids weaving through halls like ghosts with mops. Today, you've been assigned to one of the strangest and most invisible jobs in the castle, the tending the lady of the house. You're summoned early to the solar, no, not the sun, the solarium, the private sitting and living space of the lord's wife and her closest attendants. Unlike the clang of the forge or the muddy sprawl of the kitchen yard, this world smells of rose oil and beeswax polish. Everything gleams. Lady Arveline sits by the window, bathed in a pool of morning light, brushing her long chestnut hair with a carved ivory comb. She doesn't look at you when you enter, but one of her attendants, a girl named Cecily who is somehow both friendly and terrifying, gives you the eye-roll cue to start folding linens. There are dozens of them. Mainstream fact, noble women in castles had their own courts, rooms, ladies-in-waiting, and responsibilities. They managed the household, arranged social gatherings, planned religious observances, oversaw embroidery, and sometimes handled estate business while their husbands were away. Which was often. Lady Arveline isn't just lounging around. Within 10 minutes, she's reviewing accounts from the steward, parchment covered in chicken scratch Latin. She murmurs about grain shortages, a missing bolt of velvet, and whether Brother Anselm really needs 2 candles per sermon. You sit in the corner with your linen mountain and try not to sneeze. The soap here smells like lavender with a dash of smeg. Then comes the dressing ritual. You and another attendant bring over the layers, linen chemise, corset, padded underskirt, embroidered overdress, then girdle, veil, and a headband with tiny pearls. It takes 5 people and 30 minutes just to get her dressed. You've seen knights gear up for war in less time. Mind the hem, Cecily whispers. That embroidery took 6 months. You nod, lifting it like it's made of glass. Historians still argue whether noblewomen had much power in medieval castles. Some point to examples like Eleanor of Aquitaine or Matilda of Tuscany, who ran kingdoms. Others argue most women were sidelined. Truth? It probably depended on the woman and the day. After dressing, Lady Arveline heads to the chapel. You follow 2 paces behind. The chapel is a small stone room with wooden pews and a painted ceiling that smells like old incense and moldy hymnals. The priest mumbles through matins, and the lady kneels with practiced grace. You, on the other hand, kneel directly onto a loose tile and yelp. Cecily smirks. Quirky tidbit, medieval noblewomen sometimes used prayer as political theatre. They'd publicly kneel for hours, requesting divine favor for their husbands' campaigns, or subtly showing off their virtue. One woman in France was said to faint daily from piety. Or hunger. Probably both. Back in the solar, embroidery begins. Lady Arveline chooses her seat by the fire. The work is brutal, tight stitching with silk thread, some dyed with crush beetles, others with rare indigo. You're asked to assist with the pattern layout, a hunting scene with boars and stylized vines. You poke yourself 5 times just threading the needle. Cecily tells you you're bleeding on the linen. Oops. Afterward comes the real work, letters. Lady Arveline is composing correspondence to another noblewoman about her daughter's marriage prospects. You hold the parchment while she dictates, her voice cool and calculated. She is fair, modest, and capable of bearing many sons. Write that down. You do, awkwardly, in poor Latin. She corrects your spelling twice and tells you to re-ink the quill. By the end, your hand is cramped and ink-stained, and she has a flawless letter sealed with wax and a gold ring. You're dismissed for lunch. Cecily sneaks you a piece of almond cake from the lady's plate. Don't say I never did anything for you. In the afternoon, there's a visitor, another lady from a neighboring manor, come to gossip, sip spiced wine, and show off a new cloak made from ermine. She talks about her cousin's scandalous annulment, a bishop's pet monkey, and a feast where someone served peacock painted back into its feathers. You pretend not to listen. You totally listen. Then Lady Aveline shows her a tapestry in progress, a large woven piece with a garden scene full of rabbits and musicians. You're instructed to dust it gently. It takes an hour. One of the musicians has 6 fingers. You say nothing. After the guest leaves, the mood shifts. Lady Aveline retreats to her writing desk and stares at nothing for a long time. Eventually, she says, "My daughter is to be married this summer. She's 14. You hesitate. Are you happy about it?" A long pause. Then, ask me in 20 years. She doesn't say more. You go back to folding. Quirky tidbit, noble girls were often married young, usually between 12 and 16, sometimes younger. Marriages were more about land, power, and alliances than love. Some noble women wrote poetry or prayers expressing loneliness or fear, but most never had the luxury of being heard. Later, there's needle felting, perfume making, and the slightly cursed task of rearranging an entire chest of ribbons by color, width, and how likely they are to start a feud. You learn Lady Aveline sleeps with dried rosemary under her pillow for dreams without dragons. She insists on 3 candles by her bedside and a carved ivory comb laid out for the morning. You clean her comb, polish the candlesticks, and try not to snort rosemary powder. When she retires, you tiptoe out and help Cecily carry the chamber pot to the chute that dumps straight into the moat. Cecily sings while she walks, as if hauling noble urine is a kind of duet. At your bunk, you collapse onto the mattress and stare at your fingertips, calloused from embroidery, ink-stained, rosemary-scented, and still a little poked. You didn't swing a sword or hammer a nail today. But somehow, you're more exhausted than you were in the forge. And in the dark, you wonder, was Lady Aveline ever allowed to scream? Today begins with humming. Not birdsong or monks chanting, people. Whispering, rustling, bustling, moving with barely restrained excitement like someone said free wine or the tax collectors retiring. You pull on your hose and tunic and emerge into a castle transformed. Banners are being unfurled from the towers, long tables are being dragged into the great hall, and you're almost knocked over by a boy carrying a barrel the size of a pony. A tournament is coming. Or at least, a tournament's half-brother, a feast day with a bit of jousting, a bit of archery, and a lot of excuses to show off. You've been assigned to the event crew, which is fancy talk for run around and make sure nothing collapses. Which is fair, this castle is about to entertain guests. Mainstream fact, tournaments in medieval Europe were part sport, part spectacle, and part political mixer. Lords hosted them to forge alliances, entertain visiting nobles, and display military readiness. Not all were full-scale jousts, some were more like elaborate parties with athletic demonstrations and pageantry. You spend your morning helping set up the tilt yard, a flat patch of churned-up dirt where the wooden barrier, called a tilt, is hammered into place. There are flags, fencing, and spectator benches to assemble. It's muddy, noisy, and smells like wet horses and roasted meat. By mid-morning, knights are arriving. You watch as one noble shows off his armor, a polished breastplate engraved with his family's crest, flanked by 2 squires carrying an absurd number of feathers. Another wears sleeves so puffed he looks like a pastry. One knight dismounts with a flair and declares, "Let it be known, Sir Osric of Wensford has arrived." You write it down in your head, just in case you ever need to make a dramatic entrance at a bake sale. Quirky tidbit, some knights hired heralds not just for announcements, but to carefully track their wins and losses. Like medieval sport stats. Some heralds even fudged the records to protect a lord's reputation, because even in the 1300s, image was everything. Back inside the castle, the Great Hall is in full chaos. You're sweeping, laying out benches, and helping string garlands made of ivy and herbs, both for decoration and, let's be honest, for smell control. The cooks are in meltdown mode. There's a whole boar roasting on a spit, trays of marzipan fruits, pies shaped like swans, and enough meat to float a small canoe. A child is assigned to keep waving a fan at the jelly so it doesn't melt. You're told to deliver a tray of goblets to the main dais. You drop one. Everyone hears. You hold your breath, but the steward just sighs and says, "At least it wasn't a swan pie." Carry on. You do carry on, straight into the armory, where a knight is yelling that his lance has been moved for inches and is now unusable. "Do you want me to miss?" he barks. That's a joust-threatening offense. Historians still argue whether medieval tournaments were truly about training or mostly about peacocking. Some claim they started as brutal melee brawls, but by the late 13th century, they were highly regulated, less blood, more velvet. Outside, the games begin. You sneak out to watch from the side, using a stack of hay bales as your throne. The jousting isn't to the death, just points. Still, the horses thunder past, hooves pounding like war drums. Lances crack, splinters fly, and one poor knight lands so hard he forgets his name for 10 minutes. Between matches, there's archery. You see a woman in a blue tunic split a bullseye, and the crowd loses its mind. She bows, grinning. You learn she's the Reeve's daughter. Her prize? A bolt of Flemish wool and 3 mugs of cider. Solid. Back inside, you help prepare for the evening feast. The great hall has been transformed again. Candles in iron chandeliers flicker like stars. Platters are being laid out in an order so strict it might qualify as religious law. Bread, then meat, then fish, then pies, then sweets. The lord of the castle arrives, followed by Lady Arveline, who is not smiling today, and a dozen guests, including some you recognize from the tiltyard. Everyone claps politely as a boy plays a harp with the expression of someone deeply regretting his life choices. You stand against the wall, holding a pitcher of wine and praying no one wants more gravy. The feast is a mix of formality and chaos. The noble guests gossip, toast, and argue over whether the second boar had too much garlic. One knight tries to impress a lady with a story about wrestling a bear. Another challenges him to do it again after pudding. The entertainment begins, a troupe of tumblers, a juggler who drops his pins twice but still bows like a king, and finally, a mummers play. Quirky tidbit, mummers were amateur actors who performed masked plays, often with bawdy humor and familiar stock characters, like the Fool, the Knight, Death, and the Devil. Some castles hired them for festivals, others banned them entirely. This castle seems to enjoy chaos. Tonight's play is about a knight who gets tricked by a clever peasant girl. It ends with her inheriting his lands. The nobles laugh. Lady Arveline does not. After the feast, the hall clears slowly. You're helping collect trenchers, stale bread plates soaked with gravy, and stacking pewter mugs into tall, risky towers. Somewhere, someone is playing a recorder badly. Somewhere else, someone is throwing up near the chapel steps. You find a moment to step outside. The stars are thick above the castle, the smell of smoke and roasted meat still clinging to the air. You sit by the kitchen garden, fingers sticky with dried mead and your tunic dusted with breadcrumbs. A leftover hunk of cheese makes for a royal reward. The castle is quiet again, as if it, too, needs to recover from the day's spectacle. You helped it breathe, move, host, and impress. You helped it shine. Even if tomorrow you're back to chamber pots, tonight you were part of something grand. And honestly? The swan pie was impressive. The fire has gone out. You know because you're the one who has to relight it. It's still dark when you're shaken awake by a panicked page boy whose only words are "chimney's cold." You stumble through the hallways with your cloak over your nose, because today's wind smells like it's been dragged through 1,000 wet dogs and then blessed by a septic tank. It's your first time doing early morning castle maintenance, and no one warns you that this is less light housework and more emergency wilderness survival inside stone walls. You fumble through the great hall, where last night's feast left behind a crime scene of crumbs, overturned goblets, and one solitary shoe in the rafters. No one knows how it got up there. No one asks. Your first task? Ash sweeping. Mainstream fact: medieval castles relied on constant, careful maintenance to stay functional. Fires needed relighting daily. Floors had to be swept of rushes and replaced every few weeks. Chimneys needed scraping. Outhouses and guardrobes had to be cleared. The sheer volume of human activity in a stone fortress meant it deteriorated constantly without care. You approach the hearth and realize it's not just cold, it's stuffed with wet ash, half-burnt logs, and someone's greasy bone leftovers. You scrape out the mess with a long-handled tool that feels like it belongs in a blacksmith's nightmare, then try to relight the fire with tinder and damp logs. Sparks hiss. Smoke curls. Your eyebrows singe. Success, eventually. The flame crackles, the stones warm, and for a brief moment you feel like a wizard. That moment ends when the steward calls, the well is low again. Now it's a water day. You hike down to the castle's well in the outer yard. You've got a yoke across your shoulders and 2 wooden buckets dangling from either side like sad accessories. It's muddy, and one of your boots is already soaked before you even lower the rope. The water is cleanish. Not ideal for drinking, but good enough for laundry and dishwashing. The kitchen needs 10 buckets by breakfast. Your arms are not built for this. You try not to think about how many times these buckets have been filled, emptied, dropped, refilled, and sometimes weaponized during kitchen fights. You slip. The yoke tips. You're soaked. Quirky tidbit: some castles had elaborate rainwater collection systems with filters made of gravel, moss, or sand. Others relied on cisterns or spring-fed wells. In really dry seasons, servants were dispatched with carts and barrels to fetch water from streams miles away. Which meant you could spend your whole day just hauling water. By late morning, the castle is stirring. Rushes are being changed on the floor, dried grasses mixed with herbs like lavender or chamomile. It smells nice for now, but you know the rushes trap every crumb, drip, and rat turd they encounter. In 3 weeks, this hall will smell like fermented goat. You join the rush breading crew, tossing bundles across the stone floor like hay for fancy livestock. You sneeze 10 times. Then it's on to lime washing. You didn't even know lime was something you could wash with until today. But apparently, it's a mix of lime, water, and pigment that you slap onto the walls to keep mold away and everything looking slightly less like a dungeon. You help stir a vat that looks like melted chalk, then slop it onto a crumbly wall near the chapel. It smells like vinegar and burnt stone. It also gets into your nose hairs, where it will live forever. You pause to eat a hunk of cheese and rye from your belt pouch. It's not stale. It's historic. While chewing, you notice one of the gutters has come loose. The carpenter is summoned. He climbs up the wall using a terrifyingly thin ladder and fixes it with a hammer, 3 nails, and an insult to the original builder's mother. You hold the bottom of the ladder and try not to think about what happens if medieval OSHA fails. Historians still argue whether castles were truly self-sustaining or always needed outside help. Some estates kept livestock, grew grain, and managed their own trades. Others depended heavily on local villages and rotating labourers. Either way, keeping the place running took an army of ordinary hands like yours. By midday, you're hauling firewood from the forest edge to the storerooms. A donkey is supposed to help, but he is unionized in spirit and refuses to move. You bribe him with an apple. He takes it and kicks your shin. Back inside, you're sent to help patch a draft in the Lord's bedchamber. The window has warped again, something to do with winter frost and poorly made shutters. You hold a ladder while a glazier applies sheep fat and linen to seal the cracks. Quirky tidbit: windows in most castles weren't glass, not unless you were absurdly rich. Instead, they used oiled parchment or thin horn, which let in light but blocked wind badly. Some noble families moved to different rooms with the seasons, chasing whatever was least drafty. You think about this as you crouch by the window, pressing a brick into place with your shoulder. There is nothing dignified about this. There is no triumph. But you do stop the wind from howling like a banshee through the corridor. Small wins. After a short nap, you fall asleep by accident in a woodpile. You wake to a new task, inspecting the guardrobes. Yes, those guardrobes. You hold your breath and descend into the stink chamber, where a wooden chute carries business down to the moat. It's not glamorous. It's not even tolerable. But someone has to check that it's flowing. You take a long stick and poke the hole. Something squishes. You gag. You flee. Later, you help haul straw to the stables, clean up a shattered jug in the hall, a drunk knight's farewell gift, and even help a kitchen girl catch a goose that somehow got loose in the buttery. You've chased livestock. You've plastered walls. You've been pooped on twice, once by a pigeon, once by something you're not ready to name. The sun sets. The fire you relit this morning is roaring now. You sit near it, legs aching, sleeves crusted with lime and ash and mysterious feathers. You lean back against a barrel and finally exhale. This castle stands tall not because it's made of stone, but because someone is always sweeping, hauling, fixing, scrubbing, chopping, and patching. Someone like you. Tomorrow the wind will change, and something else will break. The roof will leak. A guest will arrive with questionable hygiene. The well will go dry. And you'll be here, carrying buckets and patching windows like it's the most natural thing in the world. Because in this castle, the work never ends. You wake up with a dull ache in your arms and a vague memory of chasing a goose yesterday. But today is different. It's not a work day, not a feast day, not even a frostbitten, stay-in-bed sort of day. Today is trial day. And no, not your trial. Although the goose might have pressing charges. One of the castle's bakers, an old man named Raff, has been accused of watering down the Lord's ale barrels and selling the real stuff to merchants on the side. Raff insists it was an accident. The steward insists otherwise. Now the matter is being brought to the castle court. You didn't even know castles had courts. Mainstream fact, large castles often functioned as local judicial centers. Lords acted as judges over their domains, settling disputes, punishing crimes, and issuing orders from within their own halls. These were known as manorial courts or seigneurial courts, and they handled everything from land disagreements to petty theft. By mid-morning, the great hall has been cleared, and rows of benches have been dragged in. You take your seat near the wall, trying to look invisible but secretly hoping to hear everything. The air is tense, heavy with smoke and quiet whispers. Lord Aldrich sits at the head of the room, wearing a fur-lined cloak and an expression like he's already made up his mind. Lady Aveline is beside him, her embroidery abandoned for now. She looks far too interested. Raff the baker stands alone, his hat clutched to his chest like a shield. He's pale, twitchy, and smells faintly of yeast and panic. You lean in. The steward presents his case first. Barrels found low. Coin found in Raff's purse. A witness, a squire who heard something sloshing, testifies. It's all very dramatic. Raff denies it. Says the leak was from the barrel. Says he's being framed. Even claims the steward has been skimming honey rations. That really gets the room buzzing. Then comes the surprise, someone calls for a trial by compurgation. Quirky tidbit, in some medieval courts, if a defendant had a good reputation, they could call on a group of people to swear oaths on their behalf, vouching for their innocence. This was called compurgation. Essentially, if enough people said you were honest, that was proof. It's like Yelp reviews, but legally binding and with more prayers. Raff calls 6 villagers to swear for him. 2 show up. One is drunk. The other forgets Raff's last name. It's not going great. The steward smirks. The lord rubs his temples. A chicken clucks somewhere in the distance. Historians still argue whether manorial justice was more fair or more theatrical. Some say it gave peasants a voice and handled disputes efficiently. Others argue it was wildly inconsistent and more about power than truth. Today? It feels like a medieval soap opera with no clear villain or hero. In the end, Lord Aldrich declares the punishment: Raff must forfeit 2 weeks' wages and be reassigned to latrine duty. Not execution, which surprises everyone. But not a full pardon either. Raff bows deeply and stumbles out, eyes wide and shoulders slumped. You sit there, wondering what would have happened if no one had spoken for him. And then, just like that, the benches are cleared. The hall returns to normal. A dog sniffs under the table for crumbs. Life goes on. You help reset the room. You ask a passing clerk what would have happened if the crime were worse, say, thievery or violence. Oh, the clerk says, we chain him to the post. You glance at the wooden post outside the gatehouse, the one you always assumed was for tying up donkeys. Nope. Some crimes, he says, get the pillory. Others get flogging. A few rare ones end at the gallows outside town. But not here, he adds quickly. Too messy for the castle walls. Comforting. You return to your chores with a new awareness of the quiet systems holding this place together: laws, customs, half-remembered oaths muttered in Latin and followed mostly out of habit. It's like everyone agrees to pretend the rules work, because without them, the whole stone skeleton might collapse. Later in the afternoon, a petty dispute breaks out in the courtyard, 2 kitchen boys fighting over a wooden spoon. You intervene, mostly because one of them is swinging it like a broadsword. You scold them. They grumble. But they listen. And just like that, you've enforced a rule. The steward notices. He nods once. That's practically a hug, coming from him. By sunset, you're in the outer bailey helping post the new week's notices. One sheet lists upcoming duties. One warns about the goose, still at large. And one states, in careful script, let justice be done, and let bread be properly baked. You smile. It's been a strange day, no blood, no siege, no dragons or sword fights. But somehow, it's one of the most intense yet. Because in this castle of 300 people, law doesn't just live in the Lord's chair. It hides in whispered testimony, in muddy oaths, in the silences between accusations. It lives in you, too. The stars are out. The hearth is warm. Someone sings off-key in the hallway. And you, well, you're just glad to have kept your spoon. You wake slowly this time, not to shouting or hoofbeats, but to the gentle shuffle of slippers down the corridor and the creak of the chapel bell being pulled at dawn. It's Sunday. And somehow, in this noise-filled fortress of clanging swords, clattering trenchers, and questionable bodily functions, Sunday has its own hush. The castle has taken on a softer rhythm today. The kitchens are quieter, meals simpler. No rushes get replaced, no roofs are patched, and the goose chase is officially paused, though rumor says she's nesting under the chapel steps. Clever girl. You throw on your tunic and follow the slow trickle of bodies heading to the chapel, your boots making hollow sounds on the stone. The chapel is small but proud, with carved beams and faint traces of old paint, angels and saints with wide eyes and even wider feet. You find a spot on a bench near the back, next to a groom who's still wiping straw from his collar. Even the noble family filters in, minus their usual entourage. Lady Aveline wears no jewels today, just a simple veil and a slightly crooked smile. The priest begins. Mainstream fact: religion was a cornerstone of medieval life. Sunday Mass was not just a spiritual obligation, it was also a social anchor. In castles, chapels were central spaces, and the rhythms of the liturgical calendar shaped everything from harvests to holidays to how many saints you had to memorize. Spoiler, a lot. The priest's Latin drones on, punctuated by the occasional cough or snore. You don't understand every word, but the cadence is oddly soothing, like a lullaby carved into marble. You watch a shaft of light crawl across the stone wall and try not to nod off. The sermon is about Saint Bridget and her miraculous cloak that expanded to cover as much land as she needed. The steward raises an eyebrow. Land, after all, is a sensitive subject. Quirky tidbit: some medieval families literally brought their pigs to church for blessing. Others made their sheep genuflect. One lord famously insisted his favorite hunting hawk perch on the chapel rafters during service until it threw up mid-hymn. Devotion came in many flavors. After the final Amen, you shuffle out with the crowd, blinking against the daylight. You're immediately handed a task by the steward, because the light duty doesn't mean no duty. Today, you're helping prepare for the afternoon's game. Yes, a game. Even a castle needs to have fun. Down in the outer yard, someone has strung up a makeshift goal between two barrels. Children, squires, and the occasional bold servant gather to play camp ball, a chaotic pre-soccer chaos fest involving a pig bladder, no real rules, and an unhealthy amount of shoving. You're drafted into a team. 5 minutes in, you're gasping for air, dodging elbows, and realizing that the goose chase was easier. You fall into the mud. You laugh. Historians still argue whether such sports were more leisure or low-key combat training. Some think they bonded the community. Others say they let out the kind of rage that could otherwise start a feud. Either way, you lose a shoe, maybe part of your dignity, but your team wins. You're handed a cup of watered wine as a reward. It tastes like achievement and pond water. Later, you join others in the solar. Yes, even servants can sneak in on rest days. The sun streams in through the horn-paned windows, and a few folks are gathered playing music. Someone plucks a lute. Another hums a ballad about a knight who married a fish. You sip broth and lean against the wall, pleasantly exhausted. You think about the week behind you, or the feasts, the fights, the endless repairs, the goats in places they should not be. You think about the people, the steward and his ledger, the cook who sings to her chickens, the knight who told bedtime stories to the scullery kids after patrol, the stable boy who cries every time it rains and says he just misses the sky. This castle, with its towering walls and echoing halls, doesn't breathe because of its stones. It breathes because of them. And because of you. The sun sets. One last time, you light the hearth. You sit beside it, knees pulled to your chest, and let your mind wander through the towers, the kitchens, the chapel, the laundry lines, the drafty halls and starlit walks, and those secret places no one talks about but everyone knows exist. And you realize something. Sharing a castle with 300 people means sharing everything. The noise, the warmth, the boredom, the wonder, the smells, oh, the smells, the trust, the burden. You all hold a piece of it, like bricks in an arch, leaning on each other so the whole strange, magnificent machine doesn't collapse. There's no privacy. No silence. But also, no loneliness. Not truly. And now, as the fire crackles low and your eyelids droop, you finally understand what it means to belong here. Not as a guest. Not as a hero. As a thread in a tapestry big enough to stretch from the pantry to the parapet, woven from soot, sweat, laughter, mud, and memory. And if that tapestry holds long enough to get you through another sunrise, well, that's enough. So now, the halls are quiet. Even the stones seem to soften, their edges worn by centuries of feet and firelight. Outside, the wind moves gently through the battlements, whistling a lullaby only castles know. Inside, the embers whisper their last warmth into the cold air, flickering shadows across the ceiling beams like sleepy ghosts. You lie back against the rushes and close your eyes, still hearing faint echoes of footsteps above, the steward on his final round, maybe, or just the castle settling in for the night. Every creak feels familiar now. Every breath of stone and wood and wool, part of your world. Let it fade. Let the echoes of feast days and firewood, chapel bells, and shouted oaths, dim into distant ripples. Let the muddy boots and burst barrels and wayward geese drift away, like dreams sliding gently back into darkness. There is peace now, tucked beneath the noise, beneath the ache in your arms and the callus on your palms. You've lived inside the bones of a castle, shared it with bakers and barons, grooms and ghosts. You've seen what holds it together, not just stone, not just rules, but people. All 300 of them. And tomorrow, you'll rise again. Sweep the halls. Haul the buckets. Watch the geese. But not now. Now is for resting. Now is for stillness. So sink deeper into the quiet. Let the fire's last light warm your face. Let the softness of the rushes cradle your head. Let sleep carry you through the arches, down the stairwells, out past the gate tower. The castle is safe. You are part of it now. And all is well.